Okay. Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to call to order our regular town council meeting. Uh, Lee, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Fredericks. Sorry, Fredericks here. You're here. Thank you. Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Thier is absent. Vice Mayor Nickvar.
Present.
And Mayor Mulder.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start our meeting as we always do by inviting anyone who is here who would like to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. That's not on the agenda, but if you have something that's also good, to go ahead and do that. And so if you guys would like to. Okay, and so please introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
It needs to not be about the budget. Is that correct?
Right. I mean, the topic for tonight is strategies for getting revenue for projects that we're facing in the future.
Okay.
That's the agendized item.
Okay. Well, I have two things, and you can kick me to the next, public comment period. First, I was at the post meeting last night. It was a really great meeting. It was a 4-hour meeting. And one of the things that came out of it is they established a funding subcommittee. So as you're aware, they have all these various subcommittees. So now they've established one to work to liaise with the community about funding, help generating some funding ideas for these various park projects. And I think it would be really great if there was somebody on the town council who was sort of a representative for the parks as well that could interact with Post and with the community. I think the community is ready to start helping raise funds, but it'd be great to have somebody on the council that we could talk to and collaborate with. That's the first thing. The second thing is I really would like to ask that the town consider allocating $2 million in the upcoming fiscal year budget for park improvement projects. I don't think anything's being discussed tonight, and probably no final design will come before the council before you decide on the fiscal budget. But I know from attending the meetings that there's a lot of things just right on the brink, and it would be great to have the money set aside so that we could start work once those did land in front of you. And also, I think it would be a really important message to the community that this town wants to invest in its parks. We could see it as Kickstarter money, and then community residents could then be motivated and to get out and help with fundraising. So it does seem like maybe there's 1 million that was allocated for the Martha property that didn't get used. Maybe that could be applied toward that. I think there's some residual money from last year's pledge to spend. It's a little fuzzy on exactly where we landed, but I think it was around 700,000 on project park improvement. So if we can maybe use some of that money and pull some other money together and allocate 2 million, I think that would be a great start. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth, and I'm a Tiburon resident, and I do appreciate the town council reaching out to let parents for Parks and Rec present on what we've gathered from the community and from all of our conversations with town council and Greg and the community and all these various ways. Tonight wasn't enough notice, just full transparency. Like for me, like I landed at midnight last night from a work trip. So it's just, we need more time to do this stuff, even though we have the information in our heads. Time is just a constraint for parents. So I was wondering, could we plan for June 3rd?
I think we can talk about it. We have when do we have the specific discussion about park funding? Is that the budget night?
We are not going to have the specific discussion about park funding this evening. We will certainly discuss.
Tonight.
Yeah. that.
So in the future, like what future agenda?
Well, the June 3rd meeting certainly had the budget presentation, which, parks funding will come up during that discussion. We do not, on June 17th, we are expected to have an agenda item where council considers the recommendations from the post committee meeting last night,
Okay.
specifically related to, I believe, Bel Air and Belveron mini park. So that's an item that's dedicated specifically to parks. And of course, funding will be part of that discussion. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know, just so I don't get cut off with my 3 minutes, I am an executive who specializes in go-to-market, and I think planning is really important. So I would like to get commitment tonight and ideally June 3rd, so we don't miss the annual budget. At least people will have that information when you all make your important decisions.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can commit tonight to the agenda item, but we can be in communication about it.
Okay, because we were given 2 hours notice tonight, so I would like some sort of, like, I mean, you have to understand, like, I didn't, 2 hours, like,
Can I just add this? Look, the agendas are posted for public notice. People who care follow them. Giving you an individual notice at all is just really a courtesy because we know you care so much. The particular link between this discussion tonight and the parks, even though it isn't any kind of commitment, was important enough that the mayor felt we ought to, even if it's the last moment, notice you. I'm sorry if it was inconvenient, but we did the best we could. And I hope you keep track of the agendas and we'll help.
Alice, with all due respect, I'd like you to do better. I'm a mom, I'm a working mom. I need more than 2 hours notice, and I've followed this process a lot, and I would like to participate. Thank you
This
for
was a loud
encouraging me.
moment opportunity, and
Thank
we
you.
shared it with you.
Okay. Other comments? Anyone online?
Seeing none.
All right. So we'll close that portion of tonight's public hearing and we will go to consent, the consent calendar. I'm going to ask if any council members want to pull something off consent. I think it's the second item, which is the request for the pride flag. I just want to say a few words about that. So I'm going to pull that. Are there any other items people want to pull from consent? No? Anyone in the public have anything to say about consent or want to pull any item from consent other than the item 2, which is already pulled? Okay,
Seeing
so
none.
I need a motion to fantastic, thank you.
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay, what an efficient council. This is great. Why don't we have a vote?
Councilmember Fredericks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan,
Yes.
Councilmember Thier, Vice Mayor Nick Farr,
Yes.
and Mayor Wallner.
Yes, thank you. So with regard to item 2, that's simply a resolution. Is resolution the right word for it? Resolution? Yeah, that's a resolution to post or to fly the pride flag during Pride Month. And it's a tradition that we've had here in Tiburon for years now, and we're just delighted to be able to do it. I didn't want it to go on consent. I wanted it to be discussed, and I just want to say how pleased I am that we're continuing that tradition. Any other?
Yes,
Other comments?
here. I think it's a great tradition. In addition, there is a picnic, I believe, May 31st. So people can reach out to the town, or our chief also has the information. And that's, do you know the time? Could you tell us the time? 1 to 4. Okay. No. Yeah, 1 to 4 at Shoreline Park. So I hope everyone goes to that as well.
All right.
And I will move approval of item 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Fredericks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan,
Yes.
Councilmember Thier,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nick Farr,
Yes.
and Mayor Wallner.
Yes. All right, so now we go to our presentation item from PG&E regarding I don't know, blackouts in Tiburon or power reliability or however you want to say it. And I'd just like to, before I hand it over to staff, I just want to thank Vice Mayor Nick Farr. This is kind of his initiative to have this discussion. So thanks for bringing it up and putting it on the agenda. And we're welcome and we're eager to hear.
Yeah, and thank you, Mark, for coming in, and thank you to town staff for organizing this. I think a couple of things that have prompted this ask of PG&E was one is the reliability of power in Tiburon. So we have, I believe, an increasing number of outages in town, and it'll be great to see that, I think, in today's presentation. And it's troubling if we're continuing to increase the number of outages in town and duration and that sort of thing over time. Infrastructure is aging. I saw a lovely article in the IJ about Mill Valley's amazing plan to underground that I think PG&E is sponsoring due to wildfire and some other safety issues. It'd be great to understand what we can do as a town to also tap into some of those funds and not just sort of come out of pocket, I think, for some of the undergrounding for the town. But again, thank you, Mark, for coming in.
Okay, and do we have a staff report first, or are we going straight to the presentation? Okay, all right.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Wellner and council members, Vice Mayor Nick Farr. I have met with all of you, I think, except for Mayor Wellner, regarding the primary topic has been about outages. So what I will say is this: for tonight's presentation, I went all in primarily because this document is a public document. It's available, as you noted, right on the agenda. The city wishes to push this is all public. There's a ton of resources and information here that may be helpful to council members, to staff, and most importantly, to your constituents and our customers. So I'll put that out there. I do not intend to spend a minute. I was told an hour, but I'm going to keep it to 10 minutes. And especially with focus on allowing time for the questions and answers. So with that, I am going to jump forward to the slides that really address the main question that's been raised over the last few months. I think we started meeting maybe in February or something and talking about this, but it's been an ongoing discussion point. So forgive me and to the public for the quick run through here. Again, all of this can be downloaded through the town's agenda. It's under the presentation, and we can come back to any one of these. But I do know that the interest is here, reliability and performance improvements. And so what I'll start with very quickly is that our data and our reporting shows that, that while we've had a small increase in the number of outages, and let me back up, that outages can be one customer. They are planned and unplanned. The bulk and the majority of outages that customers experience here in Tiburon are planned outages, which include a 10-day notice to the customers to let them know that we're coming, to give them the times and the dates, to give them a contact person with a phone number that they can call. And very often, if it's a serious problem for businesses or schools or maybe the town hall or operations, there is a phone number, and we will make every effort that we can to reschedule that work for night work, weekend work, or whatever it is that we can best accommodate. Sometimes you have competing interests and it's difficult to accommodate everyone. But so the bulk of our outages are planned outages. And if you take a look at the number of outages, it'll show here that, so in 2024, we had an average of 687 per outage with a 5-hour duration. 2025, we had 39 customers per outage with a 4-hour duration. And the reason for that, we are continuously, and by continuously, I mean weekly and monthly, we have meetings through our monthly operating reviews, and we take a look at all of the circuits in our service territory. So obviously the circuits there's 2 main circuits that serve the town of Tiburon. One comes from the Alto substation in Mill Valley. The other one comes on the northern side of Tiburon from the Green Bay substation. But we take a look at those circuits, we look at their performance, we look at the customers who experience multiple outages of 4 or more, and we track that, and then we identify the equipment that may have failed, or if it's a branch that's fallen into a tree, animal, whatever the thing is that's causing the unplanned outage. And then we send crews out there to perform whatever that work is that's needed. So I just want to say that we're constantly monitoring this on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and then we put in operational plans in place to go out and perform the work that's needed. So the sustained outage, customer outage experience 24-25 for unplanned outages, total of 12 with 473 and a total of 5 hours. What I key in here on this is that 50% of this is equipment. So there's some equipment issues that's causing these outages. And that's where we're dialing it in. What's the location? Is it a repeat offender for equipment? Is it a one-time or multiple? And we want to get in there and get that fixed. Is it an underground transformer? I know Councilmember Thayer, we worked on some issues with a failing transformer underground right downtown near the waterfront. So that the communication back and forth, especially knowing who's experiencing multiple outages, business, school, neighborhood, that helps us with real information on the ground to find out what's causing it and get in there and improve the reliability through these efforts. And then this map shows some of the reliability work that we've been performing, especially in these 2 circuits. So again, I mentioned the Alto 1123. If you've been over to Roque Moraes Park, right up on the hill, you'll see our substation there. And then we have the Green Bay 1104. So you got the light blue, that's the Alto, and you got the darker green that comes in from Green Bay up from the north. And those are the 2 primary circuits that are serving Tiburon. Councilmember or Vice Mayor Nick Farr, you mentioned the undergrounding. A lot of Tiburon, as you already know, is underground. I'll touch on your comment about the Mill Valley undergrounding. There is not much of the town of Tiburon limits that is within the high fire risk areas. And so when PG&E is taking a look at the highest wildfire risk areas, that's how they're identifying locations to underground. So they'll prioritize the very highest ranked, and then they go down the list, and using their assessment, they'll determine what are the top 100 projects that we need to begin completing. So to your point about getting the funding, the funding is not at the discretion of PG&E to make those funding decisions. We submit plans to the California Public Utilities Commission based on this prioritization of the highest risk fire areas, and then the work is completed with their approvals. And sometimes that work includes overhead reconstruction. It is not always underground. If they feel that there can be cost efficiency, if they can drive down some of the costs, sometimes they've made decisions to reduce the underground mileage we've requested to do to try and keep customer bills a little lower. So I'll stop there. There's a lot, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. So on the Mill Valley piece, how far towards 101? What are the bounds of that project?
Sure. Roughly, and I don't have a map here. Well, I will say this. There's an open house tomorrow at the community center that starts. If anyone's interested in coming by, I can look this up. But there is an open house that will have that exact information. Of course, it is mainly intended for the folks in Mill Valley residents, but I believe it starts at 1 o'clock and goes until 2 or so. That's at the community center. Welcome to invite anyone who'd like to come take a look at that. The boundary, so I would say that the easternmost boundary is going to be just west on West Blythedale, from Town Hall, City Hall in Mill Valley, going up into the canyon, and then all the side streets. So the backside of Corte Madera, if you will, and then heading out up towards Mount Tamalpais and outside the city limits to the very west, the northwest, into a mile or so of unincorporated Marin. But that's the furthest east that it comes. It doesn't come near 101.
And doesn't get near the Alto substation.
No.
Thank you.
Yes.
And it's more than an understanding, having lived in Blythedale Canyon, that it's a steep canyon, and both on the bottom and all the way up the steep hills are forests of redwood trees, and it is a high fire danger area. And I just want to make this comment, which you have heard before. Here in Tiburon, parts are, as you know, high fire risk. Our home insurer was very happy to inform us of that when they raised their prices for insurance. Contribution to citizen customer funded undergrounding, if there is a way to do this, and I gather from what you say, it's talking to the PUC, is really important, not only because there's an equity consideration where the more affluent communities get to have safer communities because they can pay for their own undergrounding, but it's also a benefit to PG&E to have less maintenance, is my understanding, with undergrounding. So I would really urge every opportunity to find the funds to contribute to citizen-generated undergrounding projects.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. If I could just respond to that, Alice, you did bring that up. I thought it was a very astute observation. I appreciated that your look at that. That's something I have raised up as well for awareness and consideration. I think that's going to take some time to move through the process, but essentially calling out the investment that constituents and customers here in Tiburon have made into the system on their own dollar. Totally hear you, and we'll continue to look at that.
And more importantly, the benefits to the utility companies themselves. And I would be glad to join you bringing this up whenever it's useful.
Okay. Yeah.
I had a question. So it looks like there were 57 outages that were not planned. Is that correct? Was it 57 unplanned outages in 2025?
What? Yes, sustained outages. And I asked the team to sort of, we could give you a long list of outages that are, a sustained outage is any outage we determine that's 5 minutes or longer. So 5 minutes, it could be 6 minute outage, could be a 10-minute outage.
Okay, my question is, it says, well, I guess it says on the slide 56% was because of equipment. Is that right?
So in that case,
33% equipment?
Yeah. So in this case where it says 56% company initiated, that was the comment I made earlier, that many of the outages, the bulk of outages are company initiated planned work where customers are experiencing a long amount of, it could be 4 hours, could be 8 hours of work.
Okay, so we have equipment and vegetation, and I wanted to ask, equipment and vegetation, you've got basically 44% is equipment and vegetation. Is it vegetation affecting equipment?
So it's vegetation that would be either falling into or somehow contributing to outages. It could be a branch, it could be.
Okay, so then my question is there any way to know which equipment is being affected, and is it the same equipment? And is any of this equipment located outside of Tiburon, or is it all within Tiburon?
It's possible that it's located outside the town limits because the circuit's going to run from the substation in Mill Valley. So the circuits are going to cross, they cross through unincorporated Marin into Tiburon. And so it's a good question. Back to your point about the equipment. So that's the monthly operating reviews that we have. We take a look at the circuits. We take a look at the customers experiencing multiple interruptions. And after they pass that threshold, customers experience multiple incidents of power outage. we'll take a look and find out where that equipment is. And we have some equipment now that we're installing in areas where we have repeat outages that helps us more quickly identify what's the cause, where's the issue to restore power more quickly. So as in the case that we just had, by the way, thank you. I just want to thank you, Holly, for calling me when we had this public safety power shut off. Power was out to a very large portion of folks, both in Mill Valley and in Tiburon. I think the power was restored within 3 or 4 hours. It was restored fairly quickly.
Was within a few hours.
Yeah, but the new equipment that we have, the ability to quickly find out what caused the power outage, to assess those lines, and the fact that most of you are not in a higher risk area helps us to restore the power a lot more quickly than we would have in the past.
And I also wanted to make a comment. So I strongly support undergrounding of utility lines. And I think that with the fire danger, with these outages, we've got to find a way to underground, statewide. And I would hope that PG&E could put, some of its own money into undergrounding its own utilities. I understand the citizen initiatives that Councilmember Fredericks is talking about. But I do think that with what we've seen these past few years, it's got to be a huge priority for the utility to underground its own lines.
So the company is investing billions of dollars in doing just that. What I would say, and I'll share this with you verbally, but also in a follow-up email with Manager Chanis, and I'll be sending this to other councils and county supervisors. I represent the counties of Marin and Napa, but PG&E's CEO Patty Poppy had made a commitment to underground 10,000 miles of electric distribution lines in the highest fire risk areas. And we've been working on that for the past I can't even remember now, 6 years or so, 5 or 6 years. We submit plans to the CPUC and we make requests to underground. We don't authorize it ourselves. It has to be reviewed and approved. And in the past, the number of mileage that we have submitted for approval has been reduced. So it helps.
You mean reduced by the CPUC?
Correct. So we believe that we can bring the costs of undergrounding down and come up with a 10-year plan right now we are on a 3-year cycle where we provide a rate case to the CPUC, what projects we'd like to complete, not just undergrounding, but broadly gas, electric, vegetation, and that gets reviewed, modified, approved. They're the regulating body, but we believe that with a 10-year plan, we can achieve, a greater economy of scale, reduce costs. To me, more importantly, it allows us to plan with county, city roads, because if there's a paving project, the last thing we want to see is a brand new paved road, and then we get a 3-year approval. The road's been paved just that year or the year before, and we want to get the undergrounding done. Now it's driving up costs because we're trying to trench roads that have been brand new paved. If we can plan 10 years out, we can coordinate, we can work on gas and sewer or water projects, and again, save money, better experience for the customers. And so I will be sending you some information about that 10-year program, and we are urging the legislature and the CPUC to help us move forward with that so that we can get that 10,000 miles complete. I like to set reasonable expectations. A large percentage of the high fire risk area in Marin County, you can just look at the map and a lot of it is very red or orange, lots of high fire risk. Sausalito and Tiburon, most of the shoreline facing areas, San Rafael, the cities, the very urban areas are not some of the areas like Fairfax and Mill Valley, and out further towards the coast where it's very dry, Novato in some areas. So those are some of the higher priorities when Vice Mayor Nick Var, you're asking about how to get higher up on the priority list. Even at a local level, my guess is that local fire officials and others would want to work on some of those areas before putting a lot of effort here from the fire perspective. That's a different conversation, though, what Councilmember Fredericks raised, which is about maybe some consideration for the investment made locally by residents in the city.
I have one more question. You mentioned 10,000 miles of lines
Mhm.
that you're working on in the high wildfire risk areas. How many miles of lines does PG&E have in total?
Thousands and thousands. If I want to say it might be,
But if you don't know, you.
I'll get back to you with the actual
Okay,
answer.
yeah,
It might,
that'd be great.
I don't want to take too much time. It could be on one of the slides here, one of the 45 slides that we have. Let me get that answer for you. But perspective, 10 or 15% of our total circuit miles in the high fire risk area, half of our service territory is in high fire risk area. So if you subtract out, it's still 10,000 miles is a good start. It does not cover all of our mileage in high fire risk areas. We're just making the highest fire risk areas our priority.
Okay, and you had also brought up rates, and rates have skyrocketed in past years. I think there's been 6 rate increases in the past couple years. So, a lot of people are struggling. Is there a way that you can see to bring down rates for the customers?
I hope I'm going the right way. So, by the way, I'll just do a quick stop here where we talk about affordability. So rates are 11% lower than January of 2024. The upcoming general rate case will include the smaller percentage. So we are working to bring the rates down. Savings programs for income qualified customers, I really encourage. I know I'm counting on those of you who have Facebook and newsletters or outreach. It's unfortunate, but there are a lot of folks in our communities who either don't know about this or don't take advantage of it. We'll work with the very often it's low income folks in the Canal area, Strawberry, other, Golden Gate Village or something. And we, if there's language issues or something, we partner with those nonprofit organizations to get translation services and set up maybe 1-day stop-ins to help customers with this information. But I'll say that these are very helpful for people who want to try and save. Here's additional billing support for residential customers and programs for access and functional need customers. So again, there's so much support here. The way I feel I could be most helpful is if you have community organizations in Tiburon, or you work with organizations that are outside of Tiburon. I want to get this information in front of those nonprofit organizations or other, we work with chambers of commerce and such, but we're really trying to promote these links and resources to help people bring their bills down. But overall, for all customers, the price of electricity is actually has gone down the last couple of rate cases. I should say last couple of years.
I'm just curious, do you have any insight as to how municipalities can get involved in your discussions with the CPUC? I'm imagining most of it is you, the CPUC, and the assembly. But what about municipalities at our level? Like, I've only been on the council for 6 years, but certainly not that I remember we've ever been invited in or even notified of like CPUC negotiations. And it seems like it might be interesting for us to have a voice.
Absolutely.
If you consider every municipality, but do you have any insight into that?
I absolutely have insight into that. So they welcome written letters very often. So as an example, I did not come to Tiburon or Sausalito and necessarily and ask for letters of support for undergrounding for some of the reasons we've already talked about, right? I think you'd say, show us undergrounding and we'll show you a letter of support. Okay, I get that. But as an example, so we want to continue operating Diablo Canyon power plant for, it's scheduled to close. It provides 9% of California's power. So that's an opportunity where you could join in and support and write a letter to the CPUC and to legislation to continue that. The electric undergrounding that I talked about, my take on it is I completely understand the value of undergrounding all wires. It's very expensive. It does increase costs, but we're trying to find ways to bring that down. My point of view, I live in Napa. I've lived there for over 50 years. And I live in the city of Napa. We are not in a high fire risk area, but but I'll be more than happy to see all the undergrounding that's taking place in the surrounding areas. Tourism, smoke. I mean, just it's horrible. I've seen too many fires, and so if we can find places here in Marin, and I know we have them on the list of high fire risk areas, support, even Tiburon and Sausalito and San Rafael areas that look Larkspur and Corte Madera that may not be in that high fire risk area, supporting that undergrounding effort throughout the rest of Marin benefits the county overall. I mean, economics, health and safety, who wants to see drive up to Napa and take a look at the sticks that are burned and left on every mountain. It's been rough.
And sorry, completely different question. On your completed reliability work sheet, what's the breakdown between equipment and vegetation? I assume that means both. And one of your slides said you showed like a map of completed reliability work.
Oh,
so is that both vegetation management and equipment upgrades, or just one of those two?
Jack,
That-
I think it's the 2 check marks. That's the work they did last year. They upgraded the software and then they repaired equipment.
But
Is there more than those 2 things that just aren't listed?
yeah, so this is reliability work that's really focused, I think, a little bit more on installing improved equipment where they've identified through the monthly operating reviews. But it does include the vegetation work. So we have routine vegetation work, again, required by the California Public Utilities Commission to trim back the trees, to keep them away. That's good for keeping the vegetation away, but it also helps to reduce the animal interface that we often have. Squirrels are probably the number one culprit for these things. But again, you'll see that installing equipment that helps us to see those hazards. They can find out more quickly what the location is of that. In some cases, they may be installing. I can't tell you where exactly, but they may be installing cameras so they can do a quick scan and whatnot. So,
I think you want slide 27, Jack, for the vegetation management. So it's a different section than the
Oh, yeah.
reliability. So the vegetation management.
I was just curious how PG&E thought about reliability management and whether it was
Yeah.
both equipment and vegetation. Really, is what I was.
It is absolutely.
And I'm assuming it's both proactive equipment replacement and reactive when something fails, right?
Yes, we proactively for equipment, we're going to let the equipment run as long as long as we can, again, trying to keep the customer costs down. So ultimately, we're not going out in advance and saying, gee, it's getting old. If it's performing well, we'll do tests. We check on it regularly and such, but we're going to use it as long as we can safely. But to the question, though, of the number of miles, though, Councilmember Thayer, here's 100,000 miles of power lines, 1.5 million trees that we inspect and trim. And here for Tiburon, this is the vegetation program that we've had, and this is the work that's planned for 2026. But again, I don't want people to see these blue lines and think, oh my gosh, they're removing these trees. This is something we've been doing for decades. They're going to come back through and remove those away from our lines.
Thanks.
Yeah. So couple questions. Can we go back to slide 31 and 32? So if we toggle between 31 and 32, one of them says unplanned safety outages. That's when the power goes out and you're not expecting the power to go out. That's the second slide where there's just the one chart.
Yes.
What's the difference? Can you walk me through the differences between this slide and the previous slide? What should we take away from the differences between these two?
Sure. So, well, okay.
So one of them is I see 12 outages of 120 minutes or more that on average affect 473 residents. Is that residents or is that
is meters?
Is that home?
That is home. That is a home meter.
Okay, so a customer is a household.
Correct.
Okay.
We don't know whether there's 3 or 4
Right.
people living in the home.
So if there are, let's just say, I don't
3.
off the, I'm trying to pull this number out. Is it 2,600 homes in Tiburon?
I think it's probably closer to 3,000.
Yeah, so that's over 10% of Tiburon, right? That experienced 12 outages of an average length of 5 hours. So that's 60 hours of outage, if my math is correct there.
Yeah, yes.
And then the previous slide, I see 8 outages in 24 and 9 in 25. But in 2025, only 39 people got outages. And then there were also, looks like much tinier outages that were 57 in total. Is that how we should read that?
I am getting a little, I may need to follow up with you to drill down further on this, and I'm happy to do it.
I'm just trying to understand what to take away from this, because 56% of 57 sustained outages, or is it 56% of the 9 outages that are
the
company
50,
initiated?
so in this particular one, the sustained outages for 2025, 56% would be the company initiated outages, which would have received the notifications
Out of the 57.
out of the 57 for 2025.
But sustained outages are they 5 minutes in length, or are they 120 minutes in length?
Typically for a company initiated outage, it's going to be several hours. That's where they're going to be coming. If it's company initiated work where they're getting notification to the customers, which that's the 56% of the 57. And I don't have a calculator here to tell you what number that is, but let's call it 25 of the outages, maybe 30. They would have received a planned outage notification. Typically they're going to be 4 hours, 6 up to 8 hours. Is that the question that you're?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, like, what's the difference between the two slides, because it's a little bit confusing. And then the numbers 85 versus 8 and 57 versus 9, like there, you see, you can see the single star and the double star, and on the footnotes it says the single star is this data only includes outage events that were 120 minutes and longer, which is different than 5 minutes. And then the double star says data reflects Tiburon customers experiencing 4 or more outages of 120 minutes and longer. So they're both of them are 57 outages of 120 minutes or longer. Seems like a lot, and I think we would have heard about that. So that might need to be revised in some way.
Okay, and I can take a look. So, and some of those are going to include storm events. So when you say you would have heard about it, if so we have heavy winter storms, wind, rain. I think a lot of customers say, up, the power's out. We get it. There's, they're coming, they're making the work. We inform them. I think it's when the power goes out on a dry, sunny day and people
Right.
are saying, what the heck is going on? Why? And then that's where you're probably, I'm guessing, really hear about it. So of the 85 sustained outages, yes, that's 120 minutes or longer, and the 57 sustained outages, 120 minutes or longer. I asked the data team to dial in, okay, fine, but how many people are experiencing this multiple times? So you would have 85 customers or 85 sustained outages or 57 sustained outages. That might be a customer who had that experience once. So I asked our team, okay, but who's experiencing this multiple times? And so that's where they broke that out. There were 8 different outages that affected customers more than 4 times or more, 9 outages, 4 times or more for 120 minutes or longer. And so you slice or dice the data. I was trying to find something manageable to that you could see. And I asked, we ask customers experiencing multiple interruptions of 4 or more. Okay, fine. I tend to think that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, people can live with that. You get into the 2 hour and longer range, that becomes a challenge. If you have medical devices, if you're working from home, if you have children, whatever. So that was the threshold that I asked the data team to dig into. If you want us to slice and dice the data a little bit more, I'm happy to bring you back some other charts or slides.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to follow up with this because it's a little bit unclear. I think the other piece that isn't in here that would be helpful is I think you and I talked about the electrical reliability reports that come out annually. The 2025 has not come out yet, but if you look at 2024, 2023, 2022, those have an upward trend across the board for outage. And that's not exactly reflected. I mean, it is kind of reflected here. But I think what we're concerned about is if we go back let's say to 2023 or 2022, what direction is Tiburon trending? How does that compare to the outages that you're seeing at the county level, state level? Because a really simple, Google search or ChatGPT search shows a much lower amount of outage outside the state of California than what I think we're seeing here. So there are concerns around how does that compare at the national level also. There are unique things to Marin, there are unique things to Tiburon and to California in terms of wildfire risk and aging infrastructure, especially in Marin and Sonoma County. We have a lot of really, really old infrastructure that we kick the can down the road on. But it'd be good to see, I think, a little more detail and a little more unpacked about that. And then we'd love to work with you guys around how do we move forward? How do we think about upgrading that in a town like Tiburon, where if we don't qualify for wildfire, if it is everyone coming out of pocket in Tiburon for those upgrades, or are there other programs we should be looking at? So to Council Member Ryan's point, is there something we can do with the California Public Utilities Commission? I think that's where we need to figure something out, because it's not getting better here.
So what I would offer is perhaps, and I know there's Brown Act considerations or whatnot, but if one or two of you would like to, I'm happy to schedule a meeting with our electric superintendent, who's in charge of the North Bay area, that basically is they call it the Sonoma division, and we have different divisions and names of Marin County and Sonoma. And with our electric supervisors, our electric distribution engineers and whatnot, to walk through the performance of the two Tiburon circuits, to look at the outage data, to take a look at overall comparisons. And I mean, baseline, you're asking the question, like, are our constituents getting, at least, a national or California or Marin average? Is Tiburon benefiting from the attention that's due, especially with the investment, as Councilmember Frederick's already mentioned, has gone to great lengths to underground half of the town or so.
Right. I think that would be really helpful. I think, PG&E is our partner in this. So I think we'd love to have that conversation. I think the other things that you and I talked about were disaster and emergency preparedness, and understanding where there are community areas where we can, like how TBD has some significant investment that they were able to secure financing for around batteries. What we can do to think about disaster and emergency preparedness in Tiburon. We have some locations here that are designated community spaces. It probably makes sense for us to think about how to make sure the power stays on in those places for a longer duration in the event of some catastrophic event. That's something for us to think about also. But I really appreciate you coming in, and thank you for letting me ask you a million questions and follow-ups.
I welcome it. Reasonable questions, and I think it's our goal to keep the power on at all times. And so anything that we can do to talk about that, and especially, inform our customers, your constituents, our message, which is the message you want to have, is we are aware of when there are outages. We understand the impacts and the inconvenience that they have on customers. We are definitely not ignoring that problem. And I'll reach back out through town manager and see how we can maybe pull a meeting together and talk about these issues. But I will say one thing, that our regional vice president, Dave Canny, who is a Marin County resident here and keenly aware of all the local issues, we have a meeting every month, and we meet for 2.5 hours and drill down on these things. And we have teams that are assigned to work on these. I've worked with the company for 13 years. And if you want to check that, you can see, like a tree, there's rings, and I have lines in between where my hair is gone. So that's verifiable data. But the change in the company, even in the time that I've been here in the 13 years, it's really substantial. People are working very, very hard to improve the performance and the reliability and the customer experience. And I want to be able to help not just talk about that, but show it with data. So if we can meet, I think the benefit of the meeting was like, let's meet, let's talk about what data be helpful, and then perhaps come back at a future date and show it in another presentation.
Yeah, I think there are a couple parts to that. One is meeting is definitely a good idea. I think the second thing is we also need to convince Mayor Wellner to re-agendize something if we're thinking about, you know, maybe doing a subcommittee or something else like that.
I'm here for you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the time, and call me anytime and I'll reach back out to town manager.
Okay, and I'm not sure, but I believe we need to have public comment as well, even if it's a presentation.
I will step away from the microphone. Thank you.
So thank you very much. That was very helpful. Any public comment on this topic, either in this room or online?
I do have one online when you're ready.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
We'll recognize Andrew.
Hi there. This is Andrew Thompson, former mayor, and I have a specific question about undergrounding and specifically Rule 20A, which is essentially the formula by which from rates, a certain amount of money is sent back to towns for specifically so they could use that money to underground utilities. I'm just wondering if you can tell us as to where that stands today, because I think they started to look at reforming or changing the rule a couple of years ago. And to answer Jack Ryan's question, yes, we can as a county and towns make a difference in front of the PUC. So just give you a little background, late 90s, I was elected by all of Marin County to represent them in when they were starting to review Rule 20A. So we could, and our goal as a county was to radically increase the amount of money for undergrounding. Currently, then, we got enough money to do one pole a year, which wasn't enough at all. So we were trying to get that tenfold up. I started attending hearings and we were making testimony, everything. And then we ran it straight into the energy crisis, which, ended up Gray Davis getting recalled and the whole bit. They shelved the whole program and I don't think it's really gotten off the shelf yet. Could the PG&E representative give us an update on where Rule 20A is now, and is there discussions on increasing that formula?
Yeah, I mean, we normally don't, this is a time for public comment as opposed to back and forth. If there's a quick answer, please go ahead.
There is a quick answer. The CPUC has sunset that program, and towns and cities that we have liaisons that work with those public works directors and others on those projects. We're working to complete those projects that are in the pipeline, but again, the CPUC did sunset the Rule 20A program.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other comments?
Seeing none.
Okay, great. So we'll close the public hearing. And again, thanks so much. I'm sure we'll be seeing you again soon. Sounds like the vice mayor has some plans on a subsequent agenda item. So,
Thank
all right, thank you. All right, so moving on to action items, we now have presentation and vote on expenditure plan from the Transportation Authority of Marin. Do we have a staff report from staff, or are we?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, we do have two representatives from the Transportation Authority of Marin here who are going to give a presentation, but just very briefly, the Transportation Authority of Marin, commonly known as TAM, is the Congestion Management Agency and Transportation Sales Tax Authority of Marin. It's an independent agency, and the TAM board is composed of elected officials from every town and city in Marin and all 5 members of the Board of Supervisors. On November 6, 2018, Marin voters approved Measure AA to renew and extend Measure A, the countywide half-cent transportation sales tax. The Measure A expenditure plan funds core transportation needs, including local streets and roads, safe routes to school, transit services, and highway improvements. Measure A requires the expenditure plan to be reviewed every 6 years to ensure funding reflects evolving transportation needs, community priorities, and emerging challenges. Today, you're going to hear a presentation from the folks at TAM on the proposed renewal of that expenditure plan. And at the end of presentation, public comment and questions, you'll consider approval of the amended Measure AA expenditure plan, which is attached as Exhibit 2 to your staff report. And this is as adopted by the Transportation Authority of Marin's board on March 26, 2026. With that, I'll turn it over to Ann Richmond and Derek McGill from TAM.
Thank you. Welcome. Look forward to your presentation. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, your city manager just covered a lot of our slides, so so thank you for that introduction. Ann Richmond, Executive Director here at TAM, Transportation Authority of Marin. And first off, thank you to the mayor and the council and staff for the opportunity to present here today. This is an action item, and we are seeking approval from the council for amendments to the expenditure plan for Marin's half-cent transportation sales tax, known as Measure AA, which was approved by voters in 2018. So I'll do a quick introduction of the agency and then walk through the Measure AA review process and the proposed amendments for your consideration. And I would just like to clarify at the outset that this is not proposing an increase or a change in the half-cent sales tax rate. It is proposing some amendments to how those funds are distributed. So just a quick refresh on what TAM is. We are the state designated congestion management agency for Marin County, the Sales Tax Authority, and the Vehicle Registration Fee Authority. We are an independent agency with a board of elected officials, which is all 5 of the county supervisors, plus 1 council member from each incorporated city and town. Councilmember Fredericks is your representative at TAM. We have various advisory committees as well, and our own staff. And TAM was first formed in 2004 when the first transportation sales tax Measure A was approved by voters. TAM is not a transit operator. We're not a department of the city or county, and we don't own the roadway network or other land or assets. So partnering with other agencies like the town is how we do our work too. And that work is really centered on delivering the commitments of the sales tax measure, Measure AA. So when this was re-upped in 2018, it garnered almost 77% approval from Marin County voters, and we do take that support seriously. That approval included not just the sales tax rate of a half cent, but also an expenditure plan detailing how those funds are to be spent. The simplified pie chart shows here kind of outlines that expenditure plan, and the major categories of funding are for highway and interchange improvements, local roads, safe routes to schools and crossing guards, and local transit services. And this is a 30-year measure, so it expires in 2049. So we're really fortunate here in Marin to have this funding. Not every county has one of these measures, and in California, Marin is what's known as a self-help county due to the investment of these local funds. So Measure AA not only supports local and county priorities, but along with Measure B, it also provides local funds to leverage other regional, state, and federal funding. And it actually makes entities in Marin eligible for certain sources from the state in particular. So typical for TAM, the little pie chart on this slide shows our annual budget. The local funds are about half of our revenues, and the other half come from outside grants that we're able to bring in part because of the sales tax funds. So as a result of TAM's role with funding and coordination, we do work with a lot of partners. We work with transit agencies, cities, towns, the county, community groups, schools, and the feedback that we hear from many of them is that this local flexible funding is important to their work as well. So that brings us to today's topic of the expenditure plan review and proposed amendments. And the 2018 expenditure plan did include this provision to review the measure every 6 years and consider amendments to that expenditure plan. So this is really a unique opportunity to reflect and make adjustments. The measure went into effect in 2019. So 6 years was 2025, and we started this review process about a year and a half ago. So as part of the process, we sought input from the TAM board, the public, various partner agencies, fund recipients, to really get their perspectives on what's working and what could be improved or what unmet needs exist. That review also included an analysis of how the measure aligns with our countywide transportation plan, new financial projections, travel and demographic trends and forecasts, and all that information was provided to the TAM board over the course of the review. So we really took this opportunity as a good governance review to look at the successes and the opportunities of the measure and to think about the changes that occurred between 2019 and 2025 in particular. And of course, that was a time that encompassed a lot of change. So this slide kind of shows the overall process and schedule. And an important piece here is that any amendments are required to be approved by a majority of the TAM board, the Board of Supervisors, and a majority of the cities and towns representing a majority of the incorporated population in Marin. These amendments do not have to go back to the voters. So we worked through the analysis and the outreach for this process throughout 2025. We brought a draft of the amendments to the TAM board in December and then again in January. We had a 45-day public comment period from January to March. And then in March, the TAM board considered and actually approved the amendments at their meeting on March 26th. So now we're in this phase where we are presenting to the cities and towns, and we expect that to conclude hopefully in the next few weeks. And then the amendments would go into effect July 1st for the new fiscal year. So just a little bit more about the outreach that we conducted. In the summer of 2025, we did 4 pop-up events around Marin, North, South, Central, and West. And this included providing information about the expenditure plan, the review process, and then a dot exercise. I think this is the West Marin dot exercise here on the slide. And there's a summary report from all that outreach that we provided to the board and is available in one of our board packets. We also, of course, had dialogue and kind of ongoing communication with partners and our various advisory groups. I mentioned the formal comment period. We did receive quite a lot of comments, around 300. Many of those were related to a particular wildlife crossing project in West Marin, but we also got comments from Marin Transit, the County Office of Education, the Town of Ross, and some others. And additional public comments were provided at TAM board meetings, particularly in February and March. So that was all taken into account as these amendments were developed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Derek McGill, TAM's Director of Planning, and he'll walk through the amendments being considered here.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you for the opportunity to present to the council tonight. It's always nice to be out in Tiburon, especially around sunset. So try and wrap this up pretty quickly. I do want to note that the proposed changes to the measure are limited and strategic. There's no changes overall to much of the measure. We're really going to talk about just what are the changes that are in there. We are maintaining the overall structure of the funding source. And that's really the highway and interchange program, the local roads program, safe routes to schools and crossing guards, and then our local transit services. So the 4 categories don't go away. They're still the major structure of the funding source. We're not making changes to 95% of the measure. It's really 5% that's being changed. And that's really based on the input we received through our public outreach process, as well as our agency and fund recipient discussions. So do you want to talk about those shifts? It's really transitioning funding from our local interchange program to support our TAM crossing guard program. We'll be transitioning 4% of the funding from local transportation infrastructure to address major capital roadway projects. That was something we heard from multiple parties through the review. And then minor changes to the eligible recipients of the Sea Level Rise program, our ferry and regional transit access program, and then aligning changes with Measure AA to our other measure source, Measure B, in terms of our community oversight committee structure and the review timeline. I'll start with the crossing guards. In order to respond to cost increases and cost pressures, TAM is proposing to increase funding through the Measure AA expenditure plan amendment to help maintain 96 guards in the field for the next cycle. Currently, the program costs exceed the annual revenue collected, requiring the use of a carryover fund to sustain the program. In order to address this, the TAM board instituted a number of expense reduction measures and approved one-time only funds. But without these amendments to the expenditure plan, we would need to remove 5 additional guards from the field or figure out an alternative revenue strategy. So this change is going to support 5 additional guards out in the field this next cycle. As an ongoing operational program, there are limited funding sources for crossing guards, and staff will continue to seek outside fund sources where available. Early in the review process, Tam asked from our partners what challenges and opportunities we have in administering these funds and what needs are at the local level. And we heard from both our public works directors and our TAM board members that there's really a need to address the larger capital projects, these multi-jurisdictional, multi-agency, and multimodal projects that basically can't be funded by local revenue sources. Currently, TAM doesn't have any funding sources to address these major road projects. So in response, we are amending the amendments to the expenditure plan shifts 4% of the local transportation infrastructure funds to a new category, Reimagine Roadways, that really intends to get these larger capital projects shovel ready in the next few years. Additionally, this category includes 0.5% from an innovation program, which is currently a standalone program in the measure, and that's intended to embed technology improvements into these larger capital projects. This category provides an opportunity to also advance our countywide transportation plan, which is adopted in 2024. And the map on the screen shows where we have roadway corridors with multiple countywide needs, such as transit priority, active transportation network improvements, or activity hubs, where walking and access improvements and safety improvements should be focused. It's not the first time we've done these types of major roadway projects. And as a bit of background and context for these changes, in our previous measure, Measure A, which was passed in 2004, the way the funding was split for the local roads was 13.25 directly formula funds to jurisdictions, and then 13.25 was kept for these major road projects that was distributed to jurisdictions within various planning areas in the county. The major road category was developed in partnership with local public works directors to identify and prioritize major road improvements within the county. And that program was able to deliver 8 major projects, with 1 project still outstanding on project delivery process. A little bit more on the background here. When Measure A was then approved back in 2018, the local road formula went up from that 13.25 to 22%, a pretty significant jump, but that came at the expense of TAM funding support for these major roadway projects. That same year in 2018, SB1 and the state gas tax were also secured. And now these state funds, which were nominal prior to 2018, they provide almost 2/3 of the available outside funding for local roadway repair, dwarfing the Measure AA funds that we have, even with our increase up to 22%. Due to the size of the state funds in comparison to what is received from Measure AA, the flexibility provided by Measure AA, and the proposed changes aren't expected to have any material impact on pavement condition index or how, potholes in our roadways. It's also worth noting that thanks to folks like David over here and our other public works partners, Marin County and our jurisdictions have the highest PCI of any of the North Bay counties in the Bay Area. The funding shift, though, from 2.1 to this new roadway category does reduce funds being made available to jurisdictions on an ongoing basis. And for many jurisdictions, this funding shift and reduction can be offset through grants or for key transportation projects. But we also wanted to take the TAM board directed staff, and staff have figured out a way to make a change in our allocation process of these funds that will result in basically double amount of the funding coming next year to help if the amendment is approved. This double allocation process, it's really just a shift in our accounting process. Currently, we collect funding in arrears. So we wait for the funding to be collected for the whole year and then distribute that funding once it's available to a more standardized expense reimbursement. So this is much more in alignment with all of our other funding sources and most of your funding sources too. So the result of that is we can give you what we've collected and we can start spending what we'll be collecting next year. That double allocation process would provide a significant transition cushion in addition to local grants or any other support that you may receive from TAM that can support local budget pressures. I do want to note that this category 2.1, the local roadway funding, due to the significant public input we got from the various members of the public, we now clarify in this category that roadway components of major environmental projects are also eligible expenses for these funds. This is really just minor changes, but it's worth noting the amended expenditure plan proposes to align the review cycle of both of our local revenue sources. So in 6 years, when we come back and talk about this, it will be all of our local revenue sources being discussed at that time. That results in a 6-year review next round, and then we'll move to an 8-year cycle until the end of the measure. So we'll be able to have a more comprehensive picture of our local revenue sources and what is being served by these funds. The amended expenditure plan also provides language changes to align our community oversight membership between the two measures, and the eligible recipient changes to the TAMP Sea Level Rise program to reflect its nature as more of a technical assistance or non-call for project type funding distribution. And it also changes the ferry and regional transit access program to broaden the eligible recipients and include all rail and ferry stations, including in Tiburon and Marin County. So just to sum up, that is really the amended expenditure plan as presented. We are almost complete with presenting this all the jurisdictions at this point. And so we're really asking for action tonight to approve the amendments as proposed by the TAM board. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you so much. Are there questions from the council?
I just wanted to take a moment to commend Tam. This is a lot of work. And, going to get the measure AA to amend the expenditure plan takes a lot of outreach and work. And I want to commend you on that. With the priorities you've set, I do believe you're making the streets safer, keeping the crossing guards, and doing the most critical public works projects that we need. So thank you for your work, and I will be supporting this.
Okay. That was a lovely comment. Not a question, but it was a lovely comment.
You can still ask a question.
Any any questions? Okay, so now we go to public comments.
I just had a couple questions. The first one is how do you look at and measure the improvements that you have been able to impact for congestion on your projects?
Sure. Congestion is one of the metrics that we use. A lot of our funding is tied towards school transportation or local transit service. And there are our local transit service in particular has their own adopted performance measures as adopted by the Marin Transit Board. So that's one way of looking at the performance of how our transit funds are being used. We also include safety and equity and other criteria beyond congestion in our funds. We are including in our strategic plan moving forward performance measures to track this a little bit further. We used to rely on the congestion management program. Actually, last time I was here at the town council, I think it was via Zoom talking about this program a few years back. And that structure is no longer in place. In its place, we have a countywide transportation plan that identifies, I think, 27 performance measures across congestion, traffic reliability, transit, safety, equity, and climate and adaptation that track performance of our funding.
And is that annual and you would potentially look at previous years, or is it, 2026 or 2027 might be the first year that you're looking at, and then moving forward, you would track those metrics annually?
The countywide transportation plan was adopted in 2024, and we have started the 2025 data collection, but we haven't actually gone very public with it, but it's intended to be an annual performance tracking.
That's great. Thank you. Then from a climate change standpoint, I noticed the picture of Tamalpais High School. I think this last year, and I guess there have been a few other years in the last 5 where there's been significant flooding in our area. I think our public works has done a great job of mitigating that downtown. There are a couple other areas that are still challenges, especially where there's shared jurisdiction between county and town. How do you look at areas in this area like where Strawberry and Tiburon meet where we have flooding issues, or in an area like Tamalpais High School or Redwood High School or 101 in Larkspur and Corte Madera. How do you advocate for change there? Or how do you help impact that?
Great question. So about a year ago, the TAM board adopted a study of sea level rise vulnerabilities and potential adaptation measures for Marin's transportation network. And that's an actual document that's available on our website. And in it, we looked at kind of where the vulnerabilities are in the transportation network. So roadways, transit, et cetera. And that's also been documented in various other vulnerability studies through the state and some local agencies. And that plan also identified some very sort of concept level, but potentially feasible solutions in various locations around the county. This was not a huge public outreach effort. It was really looking at sort of technically what could work in different places. So, we expect that these will be large scale, probably significantly costly projects throughout the county. And we will definitely work with jurisdictions as well as state and federal partners to try to make some of that happen. We're also aware, of course, that local agencies are doing their own shoreline adaptation plans. There may be some short-term measures that are feasible while these longer-term projects sort of play out or are under development. We do have, as Derek mentioned, this fairly small sea level rise program that's part of our measure. It's 1% of the measure, so it's a couple $100,000 a year. So it's really more suited for sort of planning, technical assistance, maybe some feasibility studies. So that plan was kind of the first product, if you will, of the sea level rise funds, because that was new in the 2018 measure. So over the next year or two, we'll continue to work with agencies to try to make use of our funds while supporting the local efforts.
Thank you. So a couple of follow-up questions on there. I think I've been studying up on developments built on marshes. I'm not from Marin County originally. And it appears that that was really a go-to move here especially in Southern Marin, was let's convert a marsh into high schools and housing and that sort of thing. Makes sense. It's a big part of land. It looks like since about 2010 to 2013, there have been observations noted of soil compaction and those developments like the high schools in Southern Marin that are sinking. It's not they're not sinking fast, but due to soil compaction that wasn't planned for, they are getting lower. And, I'll put on my tinfoil hat here and a lot of people believe that the sea levels are rising depending on how fast or how slow. Those two things work in opposition of each other. And so you have situations where two of the largest high schools in Marin County and the only freeway that we have in Marin County runs through marsh that is potentially sinking while the ocean is getting higher, and seems to be a big issue. How are you guys thinking about that or advocating for those pressing, maybe they're urgent but not emergencies yet, but how are you thinking about those?
Yeah, and I'll expand a little bit on the sea level rise study that we've conducted and developed, because it's really now in the what are we doing next phase and how do we get projects designed to address these issues. Our sea level rise study was one of the first to look at groundwater intrusion, and during the development of that study, it did look at soil compaction. And so we have a lot of that baked into the estimates of vulnerability for our roadways and when those things would flood. It's not actually explicit in our plan, but it's basically you add on additional depth. And the challenge with that with roadways and buildings is if you add more soil and more fill on top, it just becomes heavier and sinks further. So that's one of the questions that I think our public works directors are also grappling with. And so what is TAM's role in that? And how do we address our roadways when it comes to these types of issues? In some cases, roadways flood because private property is flooding and it goes onto the roadway. In some ways, it's the reverse. And so where are those roadways and what treatments they receive? It really depends on the context and the situation of those individual roadways. So as we're gearing up for our next phase of our program, I think this is the type of detail we want to get to in our identified vulnerable areas of the county that we've identified. Where are the evacuation routes? Which ones are most vulnerable? Which ones are the priorities to protect is really that next question. There's a lot of roadways that are vulnerable by 2050. There's a lot of roadways that are vulnerable by 2100. And so we need to be thinking about feasibility studies and advancing the long-term solutions, but we also have to balance that with, there's probably some near-term emergency management type solutions that we also need to be thinking about. So that's kind of the discussion that we're having with your public works directors. And unfortunately, there's not an answer yet, but we're working that through our process and where do we think about our funds and our role in advancing this.
Thank you. There's a very cool project that I think's taken us about 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears, mostly from town staff and from county staff, where we're restoring a beach near Blackie's pasture. And that is meant to also mitigate climate change and do wave energy dispersion, as well as hold back erosion. And if you've been to that area, there's a big chunk of that beach in that area that is eroded. And at one point, large chunks of asphalt were brought in to kind of hopefully hold back some of that erosion. It doesn't look like it's working. It looks like the water is still pulling that area into the bay, and there are a lot of knock-on effects to that. How do you think? Are you promoting alternatives to concrete seawalls that don't necessarily stop the energy but redirect it, and more natural things? I think the city of Palo Alto took some of their wetlands, which are very similar to a lot of areas in Marin, and were able to retrofit beaches and leverage other natural elements to combat the rising tides, as well as wave energy and erosion.
Yeah, our plan, our study does definitely start with nature-based solutions, and that's really the centerpiece of where our mitigations of sea level rise or adaptation to sea level rise starts. In some cases, some jurisdictions may want more definitive protection. And so that's one of the conversations we need to have. And again, that context sensitivity of the roadways, and are we doing offsite mitigations to protect the roadway, or is the roadway protecting the community and the community assets? So yes, we're dealing with those same challenges. And I think there's a lot of examples where you're going to see nature-based solutions being advanced, but there may be examples as well where hardening is what is requested by the community.
Thank you. And then my last question is, it's probably going to sound stupid, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Drainage pipes. You see them in parking lots and they fill up with water in some places. Do they all have valves? Do all drainage pipes have valves around the county? Or are in some cases, are they two-way pipes where water, when it rains, water goes down the pipe? But if there is tide, or let's just say a nearby creek is full, the water will come back up through the pipe. And instead of being a drainage pipe, it is whatever the reverse of a drainage pipe is, and it is a flood pipe. Am I crazy for thinking that
crazy.
exists?
There are culverts that do not have any sort of tide gate or a flap on them and can flow in both directions. Yes.
Why do we have those?
Because a lot of our infrastructure was probably built a long time ago before they recognized that would be a problem.
Where they recognized water went two directions through a pipe?
Well, that would be a local concern when those
right
would be installed. So,
is that something you're thinking about? Because it appears to be a gaping hole in our strategy for getting water away from areas if we just let it right back in.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of the challenges with sea level rise. When we have these events, it's also when flooding's coming down, right? So we have high water events upstream and downstream, and everything's sort of flooding. So I think that's part of the conversation. Is there an ability to hold water back and disperse the flow so it goes out in a low tide rather than at high tide? So yes, we are considering tide gates and larger culverts and drainage pipes, and those types of implementation
Thank
techniques
you.
as well.
I would also like to compliment and thank our Tiburon town staff for installing some of these valves downtown and in other areas to strategically remove the water from coming back in and flooding downtown.
Okay,
That's all, those are all my questions.
you sure?
Yeah, for now.
Any other questions? I know our town manager has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real brief, Derek, as you may know, we're going to be hearing a presentation soon from Parametrics regarding the final version of our traffic study we've been working on for 2 years. And one of the things that we've been talking about is traffic signalization. I'm wondering if you could speak something I just learned pretty recently about Tam's work with the countywide coordinated single maintenance plan that you're working with the MTC, and what the nexus would be for Tiburon, particularly along the Tiburon Boulevard corridor.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that. And, having been on the technical advisory committee for Tiburon Boulevard, we've been closely working with your public works directors on improvements to Tiburon Boulevard identified in that plan. I think it was last October, we began the development of a Marin County traffic signal modernization plan. And it's really looking at the hardware equipment within your traffic controllers, the interconnect between them, and ability to modernize that equipment and the software powering that equipment to really advance more modernized signal infrastructure capabilities in our county. So we're seeing projects advance in some portions of the county, and they have pretty big benefits both for traffic congestion and overall operations, but also vision zero and safety with things like leading pedestrian intervals and detection of pedestrians to make sure green lights aren't being turned on when there are vulnerable road users in the roadway, and then transit signal priority as well. And so we're looking at whether or not we can bring all of our signals as a county up to a specific standard, identify what that standard would be and interoperability requirements of that, and then where are there opportunities to advance these types of operational improvements as well as the safety improvements and transit signal improvements. So I know you'll be discussing later on the agenda sort of Tiburon Boulevard's first step in that. And I think identifying what your desire is on Tiburon Boulevard is a great first step that can feed into our planning process as it's advancing as well.
Okay. All right, so now we go to public comment. Are there any? We might have to share microphones, but are there any public comments on the presentation, either in the room or online? Please come up, introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
So my name is John Pollock. I listened to the presentation. Obviously, the percentage allocation they're making for 1% for sea level rise is totally out of proportion to what the problem is. And second, I'm not really sure whether or not when they're thinking about sea level rise, whether or not they're thinking in terms of the whole bay, because there are some solutions for the whole bay in which you don't have to spend $1 trillion in every city around the bay doing walls and whatever else they can do over and over again as the sea level rises. So they should be considering those. And then the other thing I'm not really sure is when people are thinking of sea level rise, they realize all the components of it. One of them is subsistence. And of course, in Marin, there's not much in the way of high-rise buildings yet, so it isn't that kind of subsistence, but it's marsh areas that are insecure. But when you're talking about sea level rise, besides compaction and besides the runoff and melt, the third thing I don't think they're listening about is the other third problem is with every degree of temperature that increases, the actual molecules of water get larger. So it's compounding with melt and the fact that the individual molecules of water expand. So anyway, thank you. Came here to speak on the traffic thing.
Oh, good. No, thank you. Appreciate your comment. Any other comments?
Seeing none.
All right, so we'll close the public comment period. And now, if there are any comments by council members?
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment. The TAM sea level rise study is really like a Bible. And I think we should consult it as we consider our own projects to address with sea level rise, because we'll be connected to all those roadways. But we should also be aware that not only other jurisdictions are further ahead in planning than Tiburon is, we're not all flying off in different directions. There's an ongoing project at the county level to sort of consolidate, at least among the electeds, sea level rise projects, sea level rise governance. They meet about once a month. They take in updates on what the individual jurisdictions are thinking of. And it's very preliminary planning. And the hope is that the larger plans, the more consolidated plans, will make us all more eligible for funding as we address sea level rise.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Other thoughts?
I think with respect to the amendments that Tam put forward, I'd support them. I don't like to see the number next to Tiburon go lower with the amount that we have in control, but I totally get that the bigger projects merit more money because they're bigger and they affect all of us. I wish the crossing guards actually got another 0.5% because I hate seeing any of them be threatened by funding. And I think they are critical to the safety of all the communities in Marin. But otherwise, I appreciate your efforts and I support the amendment.
And I have a motion.
I'll give you a motion to support.
Second.
Councilmember Fredericks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan,
Yes.
Councilmember Thier, Vice Mayor Nick Farr,
Yes.
and Mayor Wellner.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so going from traffic to traffic. Moving to our next agenda item, which has to do with our own very interesting and important transportation study. And I have a staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Wellner, council members, members of the public. This evening, we have parametrics here with us that will provide a presentation on the final draft of the Transportation Infrastructure Study Report for Town Council consideration and adoption. Part of this staff report, we also have in there for Town Council consideration is to authorize to add the Tiburon Boulevard Trestle Glen Adaptive Signal Pilot Project as identified as one of the studies that was looked at in the plan by Parametrics as a FY27 capital improvement program for future town consideration at their June meeting. Parametrics initiated about almost close to 2 years ago, a year and a half. We had a little break in there for the summer. Initiated a comprehensive evaluation of all the existing infrastructure and conditions along Tiburon Boulevard and other principal and arterial streets here in town. And the purpose was to develop a strategic plan for the town to follow for the next 5 to 20 years in prioritizing what type of improvements we'd like to see, especially along Tiburon Boulevard and the congestion that we have. Parametrics came to Town Council in March of this year and presented their draft report. They did get a lot of good feedback from Town Council and the public, and Parametrics went back and developed their final plan, which they'll be presenting today. So the recommended actions after David here presents the plan to Town Council would be to either adopt the transportation plan as presented or with any changes directed by town council, and also authorize the staff to include the Tiburon Boulevard Trestle Glen pilot program for the adaptive signal into our upcoming FY 27 capital improvement plan for a cost not to exceed 180,000. And out of that 180,000, 30,000 of that is strictly for engineering and design and coordination with Caltrans. The other 150,000, and there's a range, 75,000 to 150 is for the implementation of the equipment, so construction. And that large of a range is just, we just don't know what Caltrans will allow there. So with that said, I'll give the mic to David Parisi, and he'll go through the presentation.
Great. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm David Parisi with Parametrics. I am joined by Jen Schreiber, who is online tonight, 3-hour time difference. Thanks, Jen, for joining us while you're on your vacation. I am going to give a pretty short presentation compared to what we gave you 2.5 months ago. And again, thank you for your feedback and questions during that hearing. We did provide some revisions and additions to the report that I'll go over. But first, just to remind everybody about the report, I'm going to spend a few minutes going over just a general outline of what the study looks like and what it addressed. Next slide, please. As David mentioned, you did commission a study to look at lots of different things related to transportation infrastructure in the town, really focusing on your 3 arterials, including Tiburon Boulevard, but also Trestle Glen and Paradise, where it comes in and out of the town limits. The focus was to look at means to potentially reduce congestion, improve safety, and enhance mobility, not just for automobile drivers, but all modes. We also took a look at access to and from the 4 schools within the town limits and provided what we call a phased roadmap, where we identified short-term and longer range improvements as well. And again, we did meet with you about 2.5 months ago. Next slide. The report, as we presented in detail in March, includes 11 different chapters, including an introduction. A lot of the outreach is discussed, including surveys, where we had a lot of feedback from the community. We took a deep dive into local trip and traffic characteristics, who's going where and when. Then we took quite a look at Tiburon Boulevard, including its infrastructure, the traffic signals, some of the traffic congestion features there. We've had a separate chapter for the 2 other roadways, Trestle Glen and Paradise, where we looked into the infrastructure, some of the safety issues there. School area mobility has its own chapter. And then the next 3 chapters really focused on what could be done in the short and long range for each of these areas, including Tiburon Boulevard, Trestle Glen and Paradise, and then around the schools. Finally, we provided an improvements summary, and in that summary, kind of a scorecard on how each of these would perform based on different criteria, and then some ideas on how to implement the different improvements shown in the study. Next slide. As I mentioned, we focused on short-term and longer range improvements in the program, not just infrastructure, but also maybe vehicle demand and transit strategies as well. Here are the 6 factors that we evaluated with different scoring levels, including how well does a project or program mitigate or reduce congestion? Is it easy or difficult to implement? Can it promote active transportation, biking, walking, rolling, or transit, use of buses or shuttles? How much will it improve safety? And then what could the cost be over time? I also identified next steps, and you had a discussion on potential priority recommendations. We talked about how funding could be allocated. On the funding strategy level, we identified strategies to strengthen grant competitiveness, including pursuing some of the higher performing and higher benefit projects, and how to leverage some of the local funding in the area. And then we certainly identified coordination and monitoring. Tam was here earlier. There's one of many partners to team up with. Obviously, Highway 131 Tiburon Boulevard is owned and operated and maintained by Caltrans. Marin Transit has a bus route, but realizing that Belvedere is also a big part of the equation and a partner as well. That pause we took was because we were watching that CAPM project go about, and we wanted to understand that project more. And so we're trying to align things with the phase 2 improvements that are trying to be identified, I think, in the next phase of that program. Yeah. And then there is a recommendation to develop an annual performance monitoring kind of report card in the future, such as like Mill Valley uses for East Blythdale. Next slide, please. So in the final report, and again, I just have a few slides left here, we did add some additional information per your request, including looking at how could the Tiburon Boulevard Trestle Glen intersection function a little bit better using some adaptive control and AI technology. And David mentioned a potential program for taking that forward. We were also asked to look at what type of time savings could be gained with adaptive control along all of the signals, as well as providing a second westbound through lane through the Trestle Glen intersection. We consulted with other traffic engineers, looked at our own models, and we think you could be looking at about a 15 to 20% decrease in travel time, depending on the time of day, which translates to about 5 to 8 minutes, again, depending on time of day, and travel demands all the way from downtown out to Blackfield.
Okay, I just want to pause here and say 15 to 20% is a significant number. I just was happy to passively listen to what you were saying, but just had to interject there that is that's lovely to hear.
Yeah, it would be. But again, that's also going to,
and that would be that's not just the pilot. That would be up and down Tiburon, or is that primarily the pilot?
That would be based on existing traffic demands. It's a range over the time of day, depending from downtown, from Main Street, all the way to Blackfield westbound, outbound only. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. And it would vary. So again, we can't give you a solid number. We don't know. It's also going to depend on how much infrastructure and what type of.
No, what we asked for is what you get, which you provided, which was a rough picture of what might happen.
And what is the time of day variation?
The time of day, well, we gave a variation because we know that the highest peaks are after school and during the PM peak, right? You're going to see a little bit less. You're going to see less of a decrease during those times because we're already pretty darn saturated. So you can only do so much. The shoulders of the peak, where the traffic levels are starting to get to those peak saturation points before and after, would have the biggest, or have the biggest benefit. Yeah, thanks for putting. And that's just the case. When you hit peak traffic, you can only do so much.
And then during the peak, do you have a figure for a reduction?
Yeah, that would be on the lower end. So that'd be the 15% for about 5 minutes. Going back, we also had spent quite a bit of time looking at overcrossing, undercrossing concepts at Avenida. And we just wanted to slip in or switch the graphic we showed in the report to one that's a little bit near the tennis courts for an undercrossing, just to be sensitive to some of the other work that's been done out there. But we looked at four or five different options, so we just wanted to make that clear. We also spent an afternoon walking that site. We also reinserted the idea of taking a little bit further study of looking at the downtown trolley. We had spent some time and we didn't see a ton of benefit at the time, but we think it does warrant some further a further look. We had prepared a white paper on it, so it is in the study as something that's documented and can be further reviewed. However, we also removed the yellow bus pilot program from St. Hilary since the pilot has been discontinued, as we heard at the last council meeting. So that's it in a nutshell. I wanted to make this pretty brief tonight to answer any questions you may have on the final report, as well as on the town's recommendation to take a further look at some adaptive control as a pilot program.
Great. So Before we jump into questions, I recognize that I meant to frame this a little bit before we started, so I'm just going to jump back there and say, at the beginning of this year, I talked about three big priorities. The first one was addressing the traffic issues. Now that we have this traffic study that's complete and we have some options in front of us. The second being looking hard and moving forward on park improvements, and the third being sustainability. This is a big part of what focusing on this year. Appreciate the updates that you have. Could you also put on the screen, I don't know if you have it available or not, but the pages that look at the different options with the 6 different criteria? Is that something that's available to us? Those, we had one that listed
It's in the report. Yeah.
And were there changes to that page based on your work? The final.
No, there were not.
They stayed the same.
Yeah, all the scoring stayed the same. I will say that any of the other changes we incorporated into the report. For instance, we have a sidebar on the potential travel time benefit range with adaptive control. Shuttle bus is back in there. There's a few other minor edits that have been incorporated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we can find it relatively quickly, I'd love to go there. Otherwise, we can move on while you look for it. But it looks like you may have found the file. So. Okay, I'll look at me looking at the screen. Yeah, there's a section of the report that has the options rated by relative cost, impact on safety, impact on congestion. This is it. Yeah, it's a little hard to see from here, but the of the criteria, the three that I really am focused on are congestion, safety, and cost. Those kind of are the ones driving, in my mind, the items that we might pull out. So I guess I wanted to have you identify for us those options on this list that would have the biggest impact on congestion if we were to implement them in the near to midterm. I think we talked about it a bunch last time, but there was the discussion that we had about the roundabout versus an extra lane. That piece of discussion. There was some discussion around, of course, the pilot project that we're talking about, adjusting the way our lights operate. I just want to flag for the council and the public what the biggest bang for the buck is in terms of congestion reduction as a conclusion of this report.
Yeah, and I think that is why you also asked us to kind of combine and look at what the travel time savings could be. A combination of adaptive control, looking at all the signals along the system, as well as some infrastructure capacity improvements. So adaptive control and intersection enhancements, plus an improvement at your biggest bottleneck, which is at Trestle Glen, is what we have recommended.
Yeah. So those two things combined,
yes,
are the biggest things that you've identified that we can do to attempt to reduce this chronic congestion problem that we have on Tiburon Boulevard
from the infrastructure and operations standpoint.
And if I may ask, so the 180,000 that's being asked for, I think you provided some description about what the money would be used for, but it sounded like you're saying 30,000 is to identify the action and 150,000, up to 150,000 is to implement the pilot. Is that correct? Or is it, or am I not understanding that right?
Yeah, I'll explain that. So we would charge on a time and materials basis up to $30,000 to start the coordination with the state as a state-owned intersection. All
Right.
the intersections are. We would also be looking at the signal timings, the hardware, inclusive of what Derek was talking about earlier with the other study that's going on. We want to really understand how the operations work, videotape it, just like it was done at the hub. For instance, really understanding behavior and what kind of enhancements can be made. Sitting down with the state. We also have within that range of actually developing some new timings. So get that going before we even do any adaptive work.
Oh, not even adaptive, but just better timing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we could do based on the observations that we would conduct. The range of the 75 to $150,000 is because we don't know yet what the state's can be capable of doing. We don't know what hardware, all the hardware that needs to be changed out, what kind of cameras, what would need to be done with the controller cabinets, et
But
cetera.
that amount is for actually implementing the pilot.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then with regard to the additional lane proposal,
Mhm.
Can you remind us again what the timing and cost implications are of that?
So that's not included in that proposal.
No, not
Right.
That's a separate thing. That's just
Right.
the second thing that you're recommending. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm.
That would have to, I'm gonna ask David to kind of jump in here too, because that'd be something we'd have to start taking on with the state, initiate. That's part of phase two. Yeah, that could be part of phase two.
Oh, so that would be to be looked at because we don't know yet as we sit here. Okay. And do we know in your initial conversations with Caltrans if Caltrans is open to either the pilot for adaptive use of, I mean, for the signals or for the additional lane, or is that TBD?
I think it's more TBD. They have expressed interest in looking at the signals and having that discussion. So yeah, they do have pilot programs throughout the state on that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not unheard of for them to.
No, I think there's some work certainly going on in different parts of the state, including in Santa Barbara. So we're going to try to pick up on that momentum.
Okay.
And then I have a question on that. How does that affect if once broadband is installed, the adaptive signals?
So I think that's a great question. So the broadband could be a way to interconnect the traffic signals and have really, really good communication between them. If a adaptive control system is implemented, certainly would be a lot more responsive than doing one that is in the cloud. So that's something we could be thinking about.
Okay, so we're not spending this money and then having to spend other money. We'd be able to use this once we have the broadband as well.
Absolutely. That's the big investment,
Great.
which is wonderful.
Other questions?
I did. Yeah, I have another, but go ahead.
Just talk a little bit about that. Broadband is actually laying fiber, some kind of cable. Is that right?
Yeah, Dave, do you want to talk about the broadband project?
So yes, Mayor Frederick. So yeah, broadband would be a conduit installed with all the infrastructure within that, the fiber strands within the conduit. So it's all underground infrastructure, physical wire, or glass that'll interconnect. Yeah.
I just wondered what the options are. I mean, are there systems that give data to the satellites, get back, and then you have a centralized computer assist station somewhere in town, or what you're talking about is the way it's done?
And if I can jump in here, it sounds like so the pilot program that you're proposing would be doing the research and the work with or without broadband. In other words, you're looking at using radio frequencies unless and until there's broadband, and if there's broadband, then that could be used.
Correct.
But you're moving forward not dependent on that happening.
That's right. That's right.
Thank
An
you.
ultimate
That's the question,
system,
okay.
Yeah.
an ultimate system would certainly take advantage of broadband. That would be connected to every
Right.
controller,
Absolutely.
to measuring devices in between the intersections, really to understand the traffic flow and the demands. So that broadband can process all that information, take it to a central location, quickly adjust signal timings so they're more adaptive than instead of the fixed timings that they're on currently.
And then I had a few questions on, if you go to page 54 of the study, where you look at the trolley, I just wanted to get a sense of how you evaluated some of these things. That congestion mitigation would be just one box is checked there. Did you guys study a trolley?
Excuse me?
Did you study a trolley, or how did you come to these conclusions?
So this is the, again, where we took a look at a potential trolley. We don't know exactly what that would be yet. We also, I think we forwarded you the white paper on that, where we took a look at different trolley systems and some of the things that have been proposed
The
and
white paper
implemented.
that I received did not look at any systems. It was a page long. It was a page and a half, and did not look at any trolleys. It just talked more about the MTA service route. The one that I received in March. So I don't know if you've done work since then, but I've only received one thing, so it doesn't have any analysis.
I think that must be the same one we did submit. And Jen, I don't know if you're on the line and want to cover this topic and some of the research that we had done and how we came up with the different measurements. Is she here? Okay, great. Thanks.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
And it also says the relatively high costs, but no cost has been proposed right now as of yet.
Jen, you want to weigh in on some of our factors? You know, we took a look at the shuttle.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So we considered a lot of different factors in terms of a shuttle, and right now everything is pretty is not very concrete, right? There's a lot of different factors that go into what type of service, what times of day, what riderships, and what different trip types we would be targeting. So we did estimate just based on current trends that we're seeing. So in terms of would this trolley potentially be used to get people to downtown. A lot of times people are coming from further away. So, if they would be driving, for example, to, let's say, driving from outside the peninsula to Blackie's Pasture to get a trolley, in terms of using transit, the bar has to be very low in terms of not only cost, but convenience for someone to leave their car and get on that last few miles ride to downtown. So we considered factors like that in terms of how frequently this would be used. In terms of the cost, there are a few different service models that could be considered. Typically, starting up a trolley, that would mean obtaining vehicles, whether purchasing vehicles or contracting through another system, and really just standing up this whole operation, communications, advertising, figuring out all of those details. So just based on all of those considerations, as opposed to having something that sort of complements or augments or adds on to the original or the existing Marin Transit service, we did consider that those costs would be relatively high, not as high as some of the large infrastructure that we were proposing as other recommendations, but as far as transit recommendations go, this would be relatively high cost.
Okay, and then you have safety, and that gets one check in the box, which I think is bad, right? That's a bad thing.
So not necessarily.
Let me just finish. I don't see how these were evaluated when there was not a proposed model before you. So also in the actual text, it says that, I'll just take a second for me to get back in there. You know, it says that due to the relatively high cost and implementation complexity, I mean, there's a lot of assumptions in here for a model that is not before you. So I think that I don't understand what it's based on.
Yeah, I'll agree. There wasn't a model before. It's just like there wasn't for many of the measures within this report. So we took our best shot at what a model in a suburban setting would look like. But we also put this in here knowing it's not an exact science, right? And we are recommending this does get further review and maybe some models get proposed for evaluation. So we didn't.
Yeah, and I think if the report says that, that's fine. But right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense because the model's not before you. What I've heard is it was based on maybe some ideas and you know, ideas from other things that you may have seen, but it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense since a model wasn't proposed to say that it's potentially modest, you know, congestion reduction and that it's a high cost and it's got implementation issues. I think that, you know, if that last sentence were to come out and the chart, that would be, you know, just saying it's worth further study is where I think it's probably at right now, because you didn't have a model to work with and a proposal to actually consider.
Okay.
So I think that would be the best way to do it at this moment.
We could make some revisions in there. I will say we have studied proposals at this level and just looked at, for instance, in Sausalito and Mill Valley. And some of these are actually based on some of their the studies that they had done and some of the experiences put forth, including when Sausalito had their little Sally, some of the experiences that and talking to the different jurisdictions. So, but nonetheless, these, you know, there can be additional verbiage added to here just to keep this, you know, this idea on the table.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I have questions. What on slide 66, there's or maybe it's slide 70, but page 66, there are the bubbles that Mayor Wellner talked about where we looked at we want to find the most bubbles filled in for congestion mitigation. There's a cost bubbles on the right. What does $4 bubbles mean versus 3 bubble sign dollar signs? Is it a relative measure? Because I think what I'm trying to understand is, are these sort of relative to each other? Is the difference between 3 bubbles and 4 bubbles much bigger than the difference between 1 and 2?
We do have ranges for each bubble. And so I think there's a scale here, maybe it's under.
But if you don't mind me jumping in.
Thanks, Jen.
So for the report, page 37 of the report, which is page 40 in the PDF, that's table 2. It breaks down what all of the bubbles mean. So for example, $3 signs is 5 to 10 million, $4 signs is more than 10 million, and so on.
So $4 signs is more than 10 million and $3 signs is 5 to 10 million.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that on the report somewhere?
Yeah,
It is. Yes. Page 37 of the actual report, and that's page 40 in the PDF.
Okay, it says what the bubbles mean.
Mhm.
Okay, perfect.
My memory may be betraying me here, but what I remember from last time is the biggest, most expensive, and if I remember correctly, it was the problem that's too big to solve would have the biggest impact, which is an extra lane from downtown to Trestle Glen. That would have the biggest impact, bar none. Nothing would come close, but it's impossible to do, too hard to do. The second biggest impact would be the adaptive signaling. And then third biggest would be roundabout. Is that kind of what we're thinking about? I'm looking at the triple car bubbles for trying to just kind of understand what the biggest impact moves are. And I was hoping we were going to add in the extra lane here, and that might be the only 4 bubble improvement, but it looks like that didn't make the cut. Can you help me understand what in addition to adding an extra lane, what other ones are like ranked order?
In ranked order, I wish I could see all the way over there. So David's going to help me on the screen here. Good, thank you. That's even better. Fantastic. You know, it's interesting because we're showing. I'll just focus on Trestle Glen first. From a pure congestion standpoint, the multi-lane roundabout could serve more traffic than a little bit more traffic and have better delay reduction than the additional westbound lane that we're recommending, but it has safety implications. So we weighed that last time at 2.5 months ago. 2-lane roundabout is
danger to pedestrians and bikers.
Yeah. So while we're showing a multi-lane roundabout, it would take right of way, right? It would probably have some wetland and park impacts, very high cost because of retaining walls and the right of way we need. But it certainly could have a little bit better traffic reduction benefits compared to the additional westbound lane.
Okay. And then the next one below that is adaptive, or are we putting adaptive on the top? Was it roundabout is number 1 and then adaptive is number 2?
I didn't rank them. We didn't rank them that way to say what relatively how well they do on their own. So, you know, adaptive is the top one, right? That's the very top line, adaptive signal control technology with 3 bubbles. We're recommending to combine that with the additional westbound lane at Trestle Glen. And you're seeing other locations too, just the additive effect, right? Providing undercrossing Miraflores would mean maybe we can get rid of a crossing guard and have less congestion at that place as well.
Well, the undercrossing, if I remember what you just told me about the scale, is a $5 to $10 million project.
That's right. That's right.
But
Yeah.
an overcrossing is over $10 million. Those are both very expensive projects.
They are.
I also had a question about the Stewart light. So, what are we recommending for that situation?
Yeah. It's called a pedestrian hybrid beacon today with the flashing lights. We didn't make a recommendation for that location. That and Ned's Way are both pedestrian hybrid beacons. There's been some discussion, and this is quite interesting, of converting those to pedestrian signals instead that have red, yellow, green lights on them. And that actually causes more congestion because you have to stop for the whole pedestrian cycle. Whereas if you're using a pedestrian hybrid beacon or a hawk, which they are now, correctly, after the pedestrian crosses and the lights are flashing, a vehicle can proceed. So we did not make a recommendation for those locations.
Okay. And then the third question I have is there a list of phase 2 recommendations for the Caltrans project that you guys have compiled in this process?
There is not. We just recommended to participate in this fall in that project.
So
looking at
we may have a list of recommendations during that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love for some portion of this to be repurposed for that discussion if it's possible. Also wanted to confirm broadband is the best mechanism for connecting the lights for signaling for data to make sure that there's reliability between those lights. Is that what we're understanding?
It's the best, it's the most expensive, but you're already doing it. It's just like at
Right.
home running Wi-Fi and your
Yeah.
computer works, right? But you can get 10
Not that we
times
need to
faster.
wait
if you-
for it, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying if that's part of the output of this process, that
Yeah.
is the best.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I don't know who can answer this question. This might be a question for Greg here. We had talked about this as a group, asking Belvedere to contribute to the traffic study, and they declined. Although they did make up a significant portion of the advisory committee and had significant input. For this adaptive signaling project, we talked about 30K and then up to an additional 150K. Are we open? Can we ask them to contribute to something? Because right now they're not contributing to anything, and they are providing input and make up a large portion of the advisory committee. Do we think it's reasonable? Yeah, and well, I'm gonna get to that one later, Jack.
I think the short answer is yes. Council, if council directs me, I'm happy to reach out to Belvedere and let them know what we're planning to do if council chooses to go in the direction of supporting the adaptive signaling.
I know Ben's not here, but can we just sort of take a straw poll or a
Ben's not, but Miriam is, so be careful.
Yeah. Or do we need, I remember last time we didn't need to agendize that. We just sort of nodded and said, hey, Greg, can you check?
The topic we're already talking about.
Yeah, can we check with Belvedere and see if, I know they wouldn't contribute to the study, although they want to benefit from the study. Will they contribute to the adaptive signaling when they are going to be major recipients of the benefit of this adaptive signaling project?
I am happy to communicate with Belvedere.
Okay, thank you.
That'll work.
So the part two of that question for Belvedere is, do we have any sense of what Belvedere is doing with this study? Are you presenting to Belvedere City Council and informing them of the massive amount of traffic they contribute to Tiburon Boulevard? Or is that something they just have to read about in the ARC?
I'll just jump in.
They had representation on the committee that we were on. So the mayor was on that, right? Okay.
Yeah. There's certainly no plan for parametrics to present anything to the Belvedere City Council.
Belvedere would need to pay for that presentation.
Okay.
Right. They'd have to pay for that. Yeah.
And I also wanted to confirm, the number, I still can't believe these numbers. So Belvedere represents about 20% of the households on this peninsula from Blackfield down. But they represent 40% of the construction traffic and some other large outsized amount of the normal traffic during peak times. It's completely outsized versus the rest of the peninsula, especially from a construction standpoint. What can we do about that? Or do you have any recommendations for what we can do about that? Because it appears that we're just, hands are tied. We've just got a partner who not contributing, but is using the roads in Tiburon to just do whatever they want and have a massive amount of impact on the traffic that we deal with every day.
Well, I also have a math question related to that, which is part of the reason that the traffic and construction traffic of Belvedere is higher than Tiburon, because everyone who goes to Belvedere has to drive all the way down Tiburon Boulevard, so that makes their trips longer. Is there, in other words, is it an artifact of their location, or are they driving more and constructing more?
I home a lot. We don't use the roads that much. But anyway.
There's another question of, does anyone live there?
Wait,
There's a lot of construction going on in
about,
houses.
are we talking about the congestion caused by Belvedere on a state legacy highway, Tiburon Boulevard?
This is the former council member question.
Yeah, Alice,
So I don't know if you can answer that.
So I asked for recommendations for a town that's outside our jurisdiction on Tiburon Boulevard.
Which is not our highway.
Okay, let's stop interrupting each other and let him answer. the
Yeah,
question.
I think Alice, it's everybody's highway. It's state 131. But-
I know, I just wonder if we have, I, I was just asking, because you asked an important question, whether we have any leverage, given that it is actually a state legacy highway and not the town of Tiburon's road.
I'll be honest, we didn't look at whose traffic was who. What we did look at though was, I think at a spot on Highway 131, what that construction, we were able to tell or predict, the construction traffic and just the commuter traffic. And that was just east of Blackfield, right? And we were able to show, and I forgot what the number was, for instance. You may be right about the construction traffic being higher. Certainly it is, the percentage going in and out of Belvedere on a per capita basis compared to Tiburon, as well as commuter traffic. They are on the higher end. My understanding is, and this was just an anecdote about the permits that were being
Yeah.
pulled in, right? The construction permits and the number of people, just right, how much construction is going on there is phenomenal compared to Tiburon.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting we have jurisdiction over anything that's going on in Belvedere. What I'm asking is, are there any recommendations?
There were some recommendations, for instance, on the construction traffic, developing a plan for that. That one certainly could.
Like time of day restrictions or something
Yeah,
like that?
so this is something that I've been pushing for a long
Right.
time, so I'm going to jump in here. The construction management plans should say the contractors get, one or two vehicles that drive in and then employees park offsite and shuttle in or carpool in. Because what we're seeing, I know in Tiburon, because I get a lot of the complaints, there may be a construction project and there's 15 cars that go up and down Tiburon Boulevard getting to the project. So it's very customary in cities and towns to have stronger construction management plans that limit the number of vehicles. So if there's an important thing, like they have to, put cement down, they get to have the cement truck that day. But having 10 or 15 or 20 employees driving up and down Tiburon Boulevard is increasing traffic, I think, a lot. So it's something that is a relatively low dollar item that we can do just with our public works staff. We could also recommend that Belvedere do the same thing, and maybe David Eshu could convince them very nicely to do the same thing, because that would take a lot of cars off the road. The other thing is you can limit the hours that they can go so that they're not competing with school traffic, because a lot of times we're seeing those cars, construction vehicles competing with the school traffic. So there's a lot of options there that don't cost us really anything.
So is this part, you're suggesting this be part of the study?
It's in the study.
It's-
I
it's a
believe
recommendation,
already.
'cause-
It's a recommendation, but I'm just expounding upon it because it's something I've been pushing for a really long time.
Where is the recommendation? Is it?
Yeah,
That's at the bottom.
I
It's that-
know we
yeah, it's right there. It's
discussed
the
it.
last thing on that page.
I know the pushback for us
So it's just
from the
one.
construction people is that they don't always have control over when they have some of their subcontractors coming in. And that it's because their workers come from all different places, it's really hard to figure out where they should park and carpool. And these are not rate limiting steps or impossible, but before you recommend something like that, we would really need to know the particulars of the.
Well, I think you'd have
And
to.
I would just chime in that while it's anecdotally aggravating to think about all these people coming in separately instead of through shuttles, it looks like numerically speaking, it's a one bubble improvement. Right? It's a relatively small impact.
One bubble, maybe two bubbles if it's super aggressive, but you have to get the people, have that discussion, right? And figure out what that plan really is.
Yeah, and it's incremental. So one
Yeah.
bubble here and another bubble there and another one, that's 3 bubbles. And, I think I want to be clear, I'm talking about the larger projects because that's where the number of vehicles are increasing exponentially. Those projects have schedules. They absolutely know when the subcontractors are coming in. Everything is very well defined so that they can meet the project schedule.
Yeah, I think I want to challenge the single bubble on that, because I'm looking at the table on page 19, which is PDF page 23. And the contractor and service numbers appear to be about 15% of the traffic during peak time. And if I remember earlier, 15% is a big number, right, John?
15% is a big number.
So I think it's unrealistic to think we could reduce contractor traffic by a ton, right? So we
So
take that
15% is
into
three
account,
bubbles,
right?
right? 15%, a 15% change would be 3 bubbles. So what I'm asking is, maybe is it really a 2 bubble?
I still feel comfortable. I've never debated traffic bubbles before, so this is kind of fun, but I still feel comfortable with the 1. Maybe it's 2, right? But the issue is, how far can you go with a program like that, right? I mean, like someone said, they're coming at different times, they're carrying tools. There's some of these vehicles already have 2 or 3 people in them, right? So it's really how you develop that plan. So we just want to be.
So it
be
sounds like the
conservative.
recommendation is actually forget about the construction traffic completely.
No, don't forget about it. Address it, but let's figure out what a plan really looks like and what's reasonable.
And then the last one was, last question I have is around the, some of the improvements that Caltrans is suggesting in phase 2. Last time you were here, we talked about, these bubble outs that they're planning from 101 all the way down. There is an impact, there's a traffic impact to it where you don't have a dedicated lane to pull off of Tiburon Boulevard leaving town, to get off to drive up Rock Hill or Lyford or or Avenida Miraflores. And even for Trestle Glen, removing that kind of dedicated right-hand lane. I don't know if there's a pedestrian issue there, but giving dedicated right-hand lanes for turning gets cars out of the 1 lane that we have moving through town. Removing those and creating these massive pedestrian bubble outs requires a car to get to the end of the bubble out, then hit the brakes. And the research that I talked about that I found for the last meeting was that it does increase rear end collisions and it has a significant impact on multi-car crashes. And while it is clearly a pedestrian safety issue for the bubble outs, I think in a lot of cases, like Avenida Miraflores, for instance, there isn't a pedestrian crossing for that right-hand turn that is used much at all. There also isn't a pedestrian crossing that on the, I guess it's the south side of the intersection. There isn't even a crosswalk. So for areas like that, I would like to make sure that we have an eye towards safety, but also have an eye towards not gumming up traffic and creating situations that are car safety issues. As we're thinking about phase 2.
Yeah, I would say that, if you're removing a heavily used exclusive right turn lane, that certainly is an issue. I think if you're not, however, and we are, bulb outs being provided, cars can still make those movements at 20 miles an hour or whatnot. But I think it's going to be a bigger issue in the phase 2 study that's coming up, where some of these are going to be potentially recommended.
Okay. Other questions from council, or can we go to public? Okay. Let's hear from the public. Please come up and say your name, and you got 3 minutes.
John Pollock is my name. Didn't think I'd be talking about it, turnaround, but turnaround, besides forever to reconstruct the thing, is not going to work for 65 to 90-year-old drivers. I lived in France for 2 years, heavily condensed series of turnarounds, just don't work. So about 7 years ago, I came to Tiburon and Belvedere both, talking about doing something about Trestle Glen. And they actually did something then. They changed the timing so that there was more through traffic on Tiburon Boulevard. It lasted for about, I don't know, like April, I think it's probably March, April, it lasted for. And then going into the summer, there was a lot of construction on the road. The timing got changed back again, and you've had nothing but problems since then. So I talked to your town manager about the situation and how all you needed to do was to change the timing at the intercourse so that there was another 6 to 8 seconds, which I think your engineer and I had a discussion about how many cars can actually pass in that period of time. And he agreed with me that, that would clear a lot there. The question was, can we get to Caltran, get them out and modify it by, 68 seconds backing up the Trestle Glen traffic heading toward Tiburon Boulevard. They've got 3/4 of a mile to be backed up for 6 to 8 minutes. It isn't going to cause the kind of problem that the left turn onto Trestle Glen would be with the timing change there. So when I talked to your town manager, I said, when the study was coming up, I think you're spending this money as a mistake. You need to get Caltrans to get out there and stand with Caltrans and get the things changed made. It's been done before. I talked to your town engineer, Mr. Eshu, 3 times. I think we talked about you need to, if it's possible to change the timing, which it was before, what's happened that no longer you can get together with them and have the time changed. So my personal opinion is you're wasting money going further, spending 1 more cent on more studies and everything else until you find out whether or not you can get Caltran to do it with the existing system. And
Thank you.
Hello, Andrew Thompson. 4 basic points. One, I think to what he just finished with, I think we're just inch by inch moving forward on this, and we should try to figure out some of the common sense things of what's working and our easiest rewarding projects, which leads me to say, one, the changing behavior, Chuck Hornbrook wrote a nice letter explaining all the different ways of getting contractors to come at a different time and all that and everything. Okay, that's all a great idea, but it's really hard to actually make happen. And you can't just pass a rule and they're not going to find it. What I have found, or what I after all these years, is that the key thing is you have to have a big marketing effort so that everyone knows when what I nicknamed crunch time. You, David, give us the hours for the morning and the afternoon. Set the boundaries. Stick with that. Make sure everyone knows that. So you have a marketing campaign in the fall when the school season starts. You make sure every contractor knows that. You just make sure everyone gets the culture as we try to avoid this crunch time. But it takes some marketing, and it takes some marketing every semester. Second thing is, how can we quickly move to this new technology of AI and the adaptive signalization? I think that's going to make a huge difference. And the more we can figure out what we've learned from other places and just get us to that right away is going to help radically. Third thing, much bigger capital project, much less so on traffic, but helps, is the tunnel. And that big thing, of course, is safety. And if you interview the traffic guards and people who go back and forth, they will tell you it is amazing nobody's been hit. So that will eliminate pedestrian crossings, which take a long time and a lot of red lights at both Del Mar and Stewart Drive. I've had tons of people already on the far side of Reed Heights saying, I will gladly walk down Virginia and take the path down to avoid that terrifying intersection at Stewart, even though there's even a light now. So, and to your question, Isaac, it's not 5 to 10. We've already had Delve Underground. Okay. Delve Underground, leading authority in undergrounding, has already priced it at 4.1 for the tunnel. And they've already done some preliminary designs. David, you've talked with them. They are an authority, right?
Yeah, their cost was just for the tunnel.
Yes, it
So
was just
we
for the
added all the
tunnel.
paths and everything.
But then we have paths. Paths are going to be a lot less than tunnel. There's just paths. So those three things, I think, can it get us 20%? Can it get us to 50%? You know, it's going to make a really big event. I think besides the tunnel, which is going to take a long process, that's going to really, those three things will really help us. John, I understand from our town engineer, David, that you asked him to, David,
Yeah.
to meet with me and walk the whole site.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I think it was very helpful for
Good.
David. He
Yes.
learned a lot of new things, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So I would move quickly on that, and that's why I say let's do agenda as a tunnel, because that's a long road that we have to get down. So let's start now.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Other comments? Anyone online?
Yep, we will start with Chuck.
Hi, I'll be brief. I won't use my 3 minutes like Mr. Thompson did.
Is this Chuck Hornbrook?
It is Chuck Hornbrook. And sorry, I'm not with you all there. Yeah, Chuck Hornbrook, Tiburon. I had to be back in Denver for some family stuff. So thank you. But hey, why not? Everybody, I know. I can see you, John. You're excited. Hey, everyone's here.
What? I just wanted to know which. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, good. So I appreciate all the comments and discussions. I think one of the things, and Isaac, I love how you, both you and Holly, were hitting on the contractor piece and the significance of that. And also, I think the potential possibility of is it 1 ball or 2? I mean, that makes a significant amount of difference, right? And is it 1 ball or 2 for costs? So I think that that's an opportunity that we can do. And while Andrew mentioned that it would be difficult, there's many of cities across the country, and it's a shame that our consultants didn't highlight that there's a lot of people who have done this already. There's lots of locations across the country that have done this, both in California as well as in like other, I'll just say, affluent areas, addressing also the area with Belvedere and higher construction going into that area. So thank you for bringing that up and seeing that opportunity, because that is the peak, right? There's 8,760 hours in a year. And the peak problem that we have is about 10% of the time. Does it make sense to spend $5 million on that or a couple 100,000? That's a good thing to think about going forward. So thanks again for your time and your guys being there. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Next is Marcelino.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
It sounded like I was still muted. Hey, Marcelino Nogueiro. I am in Belberon, Jefferson Drive, and I know the Trestle Glen intersection very well. I really like the idea of the adaptive traffic signals. I think that that's a inexpensive. Well, everything is expensive, but a better use of money, especially if we can synchronize the lights between Trestle Glen and also the lights coming to it and on either direction. The other excuse me, the only other thing that I want to point out is that when you approach Tiburon Boulevard from Trestle Glen, the approach there is very steep. So when you're stopped at that light, you really have to really look hard to see who is at the crossing area on the downside of that. So I know that a lot of cars will just pull up there, and if there's kids or whatever on the other side, you have to really pay attention. So it would be nice as part of this if that could be the grading on that could be changed a little bit. So when you are at the stoplight, you can actually have a better visibility of the rest of the Tiburon Boulevard. Also, one last thing is roundabouts, although they're great in some places, I don't think one will work there unless you can include Jefferson Drive as part of that roundabout. As it is now, it's really difficult to make a left turn during these congested hours there. Sometimes you have to make a right turn, go to Blackie's, and then come back to go downtown Tiburon. So if we do at some point go with a roundabout, we need to include Jefferson Drive into that circle somehow. But I think that adaptive signals with some AI could really make a big improvement in the area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing. Um, so I think what I would say is that the story of dealing with traffic here in Tiburon is going to be, it has been and is going to be ongoing. I think what we have here is a really important and useful study that's been completed that gives us good ideas about a lot of options and the ability to weigh them. And beyond what we do tonight or beyond what we do next week, this can be earlier on the meeting. Council member Fredericks was talking about a TAM document being kind of the Bible you go to when you're doing climate change. I think this will serve as our, reference point for traffic issues in the near future as we're trying to, figure out what to do step by step. It sounds to me like, well, I guess what I would recommend is that we accept the study, understanding that it's this is a dynamic story and nothing is ever going to be the final word on it. But I think these consultants have done a fine job and we're now kind of at the concluding point of the study.
With the one revision that I had.
We can do a single revision, but what I'm trying to say is I don't think that that anything in this study, if you tweak one thing or another, is not going to make a big difference, because what we have here is a reference guide that covers the whole range of issues. If we want to tweak a word here or there, that's fine with me, but I'm just saying it. I don't think that really matters. I think what we have here is a lot more knowledge than we did before about what our options are. And it sounds to me, I mean, what I'm hearing is, I hope we all agree we're gonna choose adaptive management tonight, approve the $180,000, or at least I think it's a recommendation that we put it in the budget for next year so that we can proceed as fast as possible to get our intersection to be smart and not just sit there dully while cars are waiting to move. It sounds to me, what I heard tonight was a lot of interest in looking into strategies for construction management as a potential low-hanging fruit. We need to do it effectively and smartly and all that, but it sounds like that's whether it's one bubble or two, it sounds like it's worth exploring, especially because there's not a big capital investment in it. It's something that we can think about and just try and do effectively. I think it sounds like the recommendation from the consultants is we should take a good hard look at the additional lane as an option as kind of a second phase after, we're jumping immediately into this adaptive management of traffic lights, but then that's probably one of the most promising big steps we could take to kind of change the infrastructure. But that would be at the exploratory stage right now. And I'm eager to hear what other people think, but I would like to see tonight that we accept the report and that we make the recommendation to include the adaptive management in the upcoming budget. Please, Alex,
And
go ahead.
I agree, this is not a Bible, it is a study and it is a map to be reconsidered as the conditions change and as we bring on board the most adaptive projects. And considering that, I would like to make a motion to adopt the study and also authorize the staff to include the Tiburon Boulevard Trestle Glen Adaptive Signal Pilot project.
I'll second that. We still have room for more conversation.
A minor amendment to that, and then I'll make
Sorry.
some comments. It's okay. It's okay. If you go back to page 54, I want to read off the minor amendment based on the comments that I made. If you go down to the last, I believe it's the last sentence. Are you guys there? David and David. Okay. So the part that I would ask to be taken out is, given the relatively high costs and implementation complexity and potentially modest congestion reduction benefits, I would take that part out and just have the sentence start with, this effort should be framed as exploratory. So, and the rest just stays. So I want to make sure that that's okay with our consultant and my colleagues as well.
It's fine.
And
with me.
I just, oh, okay. And the reason for that is just that there's not a specific plan before the consultants. In addition, I just want to make some general comments. I'm very excited about this study.
Yep.
And I want to thank our consultants. He doesn't agree in the front, but I'm really excited because when we started this 2 years ago, the goal was to come up with some ideas to help reduce traffic on Tiburon Boulevard. And, you know, I think that we have not only done that, we've got a bunch of ideas within this document, but we've also identified a way to have a 15 to 20% decrease in travel time at certain times by doing the signal changes, the adaptive signals. And I think by passing this tonight, we have absolutely accomplished a part of our goals. You know, traffic on Tiburon Boulevard is one of the biggest issues that our residents have in terms of challenges. And I think if even at the certain times, we could reduce it by 15 to 20% and save people that time, I think we've done our job. I'm also really excited that people want to finally look at construction management plans for the larger projects. I do think that will make a difference, whether it's a bubble or a bubble and a half, I don't know. But I don't care because I believe that it's the incremental reduction in traffic. So if we get a bubble here, a bubble there, we're going to have traffic reduced. And then there's a lot of other, you know, larger ideas that have come out of this. And I think some of them may be accomplished through the Caltrans project. And I'm very excited. I think we've done a good job here. And I want to thank our consultants and our staff and the public for engaging and weighing in and bringing all of your ideas as well to us.
Excellent.
So point of order, there's a motion on the table.
Can I make some quick comments though? Councilmember Fredericks, is that all right? Just,
What
I'll
thing?
try to be brief before we vote. Is that all right? Yeah, just take a couple of comments.
Okay, but you owe me coffee.
Coffee.
Yeah, well, you're allowed to have discussions while the motion's on the table. So go ahead.
So
Amended.
two separate items. One, with respect to the report, I also support approving it. I think I appreciate the efforts of everyone, staff and the consultant and the public. And I love it as a reference material, you know, reference item. I would support adding a second bubble to the construction, the contractor, traffic management, congestion mitigation. That's my only thing. With respect to the
substantive change to the consultant's recommendation, but okay, go ahead.
Just because it's relative. And it would highlight something that the working group would look at before other items. With respect to the looking into the adaptive signals, I also support going forward with that, but I would like, similar to Mr. Pollock's comments, like as part of the $30,000 we spend, could we just get Caltrans to tweak the timing and just try like 3 different signal intervals over the course of 3 weeks and just see what the difference is as part of that, right? Can we do that as part of the initial $30,000 we're spending? Seems like a pretty instructive idea or, thing to try as part of our setup. Possible? I don't know.
Response?
Yeah, can I?
We're definitely gonna give Caltrans some recommendations such as that and try to get them to do it.
Okay. Great.
That's the idea.
Thanks.
So,
Love
yeah.
it. So,
We've
yeah,
been
I think
very
if we had a
successful.
bubble, we should put a star next to it, and then at the bottom say, according to Jack.
that's the third person to do a bubble. Anyway, like I support everything. Having said that, thank you.
Do I need to modify the motion?
Well, I think we have a friendly amendment to eliminate that phrase that Holly was talking about.
So it's amended.
So it's amended. And then, is that good? Please.
Quick comment. I think this is the most encouraging. I think that this process has been so far. I think this started, in a lot of ways where everyone's just kind of had it with the traffic and, I think the original vision of thinking about going from downtown to 101, in 15 minutes during peak rush hour, I still think it is possible. It's a math problem. And I would continue to advocate that our North Star is that we find strategies that move more cars out of town faster. And I think trying the timing of the lights to like a couple of suggestions tonight, if we can do that in the short run, that's a great idea. I think we also need to ensure, I think I'm also really concerned about this phase 2 project with Caltrans and it increasing traffic and working against us. So I think we also need to make sure that no matter what we're agreeing to in phase 2, that it doesn't increase traffic and again work against what we're doing here. It seems like the most bang for our buck is really around timing the lights and using intervals to get more cars through. And in service of that strategy to get cars off out of town quickly. I would also advocate for extending right-hand lanes to go into the neighborhoods and maybe formalizing some of the dedicated right-hand lanes so that you can get cars off the road faster as they're headed out of town. So at Gilmartin or Rock Hill or Avenida, Lyford, there's a parking lot there, so I don't know how that would potentially work, but I think using those right-hand lanes to get the cars off the road can help. Every little bit helps in this process. I also think that if we're thinking about how to get more cars through the water and to use kind of the pipe and water example, you can shoot as much water you want through a pipe, but if your pipe is little, you're restricted in terms of the capacity. So I would also advocate for additional lanes. If all we think we can do is extending Trestle Glen up towards Stewart, that's fine. But I really think that we've got to open up the conversation on this problem that's been described by some as too big to solve. It was something that came to this body at some point 20 plus years ago. I don't know if former Mayor Thompson remembers reviewing this or not, but getting a lane down, downtown, we could use it right now. We really could use that lane right now. And I think that's something I'd like to, as we're thinking about phase 2, my hope is that Caltrans is open to having the conversation with us about what it would take to add a second lane, or add a third lane or a fourth lane to downtown, and what that might entail. So with that, I'm very supportive of what we've done here today. Thank you.
All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Fredericks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan,
Yes.
Councilmember Thier,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nick Farr,
Yes.
and Mayor Wellner.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Can I get crazy for one quick second?
You need
So,
what?
Can I get crazy for 1 second on this? So one of these things that's interesting, right, about all these things, and it's your discussion
This
about
would be let's put a road through Blackies again.
sort of, but no, it's Councilmember Thier Don't laugh, that I'm serious about that one. But Councilmember Thune talked about doing the models, and like, we don't have models for any of this stuff. It might be interesting at some point to consider proposing a competition among high school students to model some of
Oh.
these things and accept their submissions and see like an encourage, and see what some of these models come back with in terms of traffic impact. Because I bet they're good at doing stuff like that where I have no idea what to do. And it would be kind of cool.
That's a great
I
idea.
bet, I
And
bet they'll
there's-
use AI.
And I know at least one of the high schools, Redwood, does have an engineering class and program, and they do build models. So that might be a good place to start.
I think it'd be super cool.
Yeah, it would be cool.
Anyway, I'm done being crazy.
Not so crazy. That's not as crazy as last time. That's good. Okay. Thank you. I think what I'd like to do is now that we've done this, I'd like to take a 5-minute break and then we can reconvene.
Just in time for coffee.
Okay, we're back in session. I just want to make sure everyone is aware that this Cypress Hollow conversation is not the big Cypress Hollow conversation. It is a routine annual fee thing. So please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Tonight we're going to talk about the Cypress Hollow Landscape Lighting District Assessment. Our recommendations are conduct a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 26-27 assessment and adopt a resolution confirming the assessments and ordering a levy and collection. Cypress Hollow, again, it's area 44 parcels northwest corner of the peninsula. Here we have, we show the boundary in red of the parcels, and then the yellow highlighted areas are the zones that the district maintains. Cypress Hollow Park, an area behind Rancho, and then as you enter, we have some entrance locations and the back area of the west corner of the district. This was established in 1990 by the County of Marin. Conditions of the development, 44 parcels in there. It was annexed by the town, and the lighting landscaping district again was transferred to the town in 1998, and it funds landscaping and irrigation on the east boundary, the entry landscape, the park, and also the southwest boundary corridor. It's a 3-step process. Order an annual engineer's report, which was done 2 meetings ago. Then you approved the engineer's report at the last meeting, and then tonight we're conducting the public hearing. The assessment here has never changed. It's from previous years, $378 per parcel, and the diagram has not changed. On the right-hand side, we show what we are estimating, $19,000 for contractual services. We have $88 county fee to manage this district. We have tree service maintenance for $15 and water for $3, and that's the worst case scenario, $37,088 a year. 7/1/26, so at the beginning of this upcoming fiscal year, we're going to have a fund balance of $21,000 in that fund, estimated revenue of $16,632. With the expenditures above, if we use all that, we're going to have $640 left in that account next year, June 30th. So again, the recommendations this evening is to conduct this hearing for the assessment, and then town council adopt a resolution confirming the assessments and ordering a levy and collection that will be sent over to the county assessor's office. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the council? No? Any public comment?
Seeing none.
Okay, we'll close the public comment. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Fredericks, Councilmember Ryan,
Yes.
Councilmember Thier, Vice Mayor Nickvar,
Yes.
and Mayor Wellner.
Yes, now that's efficient. Okay, let's go to the last item. So our last item tonight, I think, is it's too bad that it's, we've had a long meeting. It's really important. It's kind of about, we have a number of projects that we've been talking about for some time. We have important projects related to parks, to traffic, to broadband. There's some projects we haven't even talked about yet this year, like potential improvements to the courtyard. A lot of capital projects that are many millions of dollars, and we haven't really had to have this conversation in a while, but the town manager has been diligent in pointing out that if we're going to undertake some of these projects over the next, whatever period of time, the council needs to get thoughtful about how we're going to fund them. And so I've asked Greg to provide a presentation tonight about the revenue situation and strategies for dealing with it, so we can start thinking about that. before those projects actually hit, and we have to make those decisions. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to reiterate, this is not an action item. This is really an information item for council just to get you thinking. Happy to answer questions at the end of it. Calling it sort of the revenue sources overview. On June 3rd, I'll be presenting the operating budget for the town, and we'll go into detail about that. Today's really an opportunity just to kind of big picture to kind of not reset, but just remind everybody how the town sort of gets its money. Our revenue is really broken into two basic categories: general fund revenue and restricted revenues. General fund revenues are described as unrestricted financial resources collected to pay for day-to-day operations for core public services. These funds are discretionary, and town council has the flexibility to allocate them based on community needs and other legally restricted purposes, rather than legally restricted purposes. The other bucket is what we call restricted revenues, and these are earmarked by law, bond covenants, or grant terms for specific purposes. And these funds can only be spent on their designated program. For the town, we typically use restricted funds to partially fund capital improvement projects. I'm going to talk pretty briefly about, we're going to go through relatively quickly through general fund revenue just to give you an overview. And then the second part will be more about the restricted funds and financing of larger projects. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but this is this year's budget's general fund revenue of about $14.5 million. It's broken up into, I believe, 9 categories, and these are listed from the largest categories to the smallest categories. And as we all know, our biggest category is property taxes. And when you combine the first two, it's really taxes in general. And then in decreasing order, licenses and permits, and you can see the rest of them there. Looked at another way in a pie chart, it's the same information shown in a pie chart. And again, you can just see it kind of graphically, what those categories look like.
And other taxes include sales tax, right?
Other taxes are in sales. Sales tax are in the other taxes category. Yep.
What are the other taxes?
So the biggest ones are transient occupancy tax, sales tax. Those really are the two biggest ones. I'd have to look it up.
Hotel and sales tax.
Yeah. Yep. This is just my standard gratuitous slide, which reminds everybody that when you pay property tax in Tiburon, for every dollar you pay in property tax, the town actually only gets 7.7 cents. So we get a relatively small piece of your total property tax bill. Because we do occasionally still get people who say, I pay your salary of my property taxes, and we just like to show them that.
I like it. It's the gratuitous slide. You just,
exactly. All right. So, I've been here 10 years and, have the benefit of having built budgets for 10 years now. And I'll just be sort of blunt and honest. What I'm seeing as the years go, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, it's becoming much more challenging to develop a balanced budget as general fund revenues are simply rising at a slower rate than general fund expenditures. In fact, the budget that I'll be presenting on June 3rd will be a balanced budget, and it'll show a very modest surplus, likely. But the only reason that's possible are 3 one-time expenditure reductions that we're going to see in this year's budget. And those are, we consolidate our insurance this year, which is going to save us $60,000. You may recall in this year's budget where we funded half of our retiree medical benefits through with funding from our PARS trust as opposed to general fund money. This year, I'm proposing to fund the entire retiree medical benefit with that trust, which will save us an additional $84,000 one time. And the third is this year, the Yellow Bus program is not going to require a contribution from either the city or the town, and that's another one-time reduction of $40,000. So combined, that's $184,000 in expenditure savings that we will only see this year.
Can I ask a question? So is the PARS trust depleted and that's why it will no longer be available to offset OPEB spending?
No, the PARS trust is in very good condition. So like today we have approximately $4.2 million in our PARS trust, which indicates that it's about 105% funded. So The Parish Trust is fully funded, and we believe more or less forever, the Parish Trust will be able to fund the retiree medical benefits in the future. So that allows us to not use general fund revenue to pay that cost, which we, for years, that's what we were doing. So essentially, we're taking, instead of using general fund revenue to pay an expense, we're using more or less a restricted fund. And
right. So, but of the one-time expenditure reductions, that one actually is replicable.
No, well, but what I'm saying is 2 years from now, I will not be able to reduce it another $84,000. You can't reduce it. The expenditure from general fund will be at zero next year. I can't reduce that any further, so I can't garner any more savings in future years.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Got it. You can't create any new reductions.
Right. So again, we're going to just touch briefly on this. Don't want to get into details. What can we do about that? And this will become important when we start talking about the capital projects and how we historically have funded capital projects. One thing we can do is ensure that all current fees are being collected in accordance with council approved fee schedule. And the second thing we can do is conduct a comprehensive fee study to ensure our current fee structure reflects current service delivery costs and future inflation. The town last conducted a fee study in 2015, and the current structure has no provision for inflation adjustments. So for that entire time, costs have been going up generally greater than the inflation rate with no adjustment on the fees being collected. I'm going to switch gears now. Oh, excuse me. I am going to go through a couple of slides just to remind folks the nature of general fund revenue and the predictability. Secured property tax, of course, is our biggest single source of revenue and generally goes up at a linear rate, very predictable, pretty easy to predict. Same goes for this tax we call property tax in lieu of vehicle license fees. Don't need to get into the details, but this revenue source essentially is tied to the property tax rate, so it increases at a similar rate to the property tax. Here we're going to switch gears and look at a few sources of revenue that are not quite so predictable. Building permits is a good example. Transient occupancy tax is another pretty good example. I would note that
that was the pandemic.
One of the things we're seeing with transient occupancy tax is, it's going up and down a bit, but we are not anticipating this to increase dramatically moving forward. Sales tax, which we'll talk more about later in this presentation, but this gives you a history of sales tax. Again, you can see it's sort of flattening in the past 2 years. And one of the things we're very sensitive to, because we're a relatively small town with a relatively small group of businesses, for instance, one big restaurant in downtown Tiburon suffers a problem and either closes. That's a dramatic decrease in sales tax for us.
So let me just ask, as we look at this, so there's obviously an increase in the 2021 point. What's that due to? Do you have any idea?
The 21, 22.
No, it's flat from 2013 to 2020, and then
absolutely.
Isn't that when we had new restaurants?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So first we were in COVID, but that happened to coincide with 3 or 4 major restaurant expansions or new restaurants that all opened at the same time.
The rate stayed the same, or did it change?
The sales tax rate,
yeah,
absolutely stayed the same.
And Greg, refresh our memories. The sales tax rate that actually comes to the town is 1%?
It is. We're going to cover that here in just a couple of slides.
It is 1%.
We get 1%.
Okay.
Yep.
We don't get the whole 8 or 8.5. We get 1.
We're going to cover that here in a couple of slides in some detail. All right, we're going to switch gears now to restricted revenue. And we talked about that being revenue that can only be used for its intended purpose. We don't normally go over this that detailed in the budget. So this is a sort of maybe new information for the town. This really is essentially all the restricted revenue that we're anticipating in the next fiscal year. County Measure A parks, state gas tax. It's interesting that Tam was here. That third item is County Measure AA, with A/AA, which you heard about earlier today. We get money from the state in several buckets for road projects. The town has its own restricted funding and impact fees, street impact fees, drainage impact fees, and Tiburon long-range planning fees. And you can see under each one of these categories, essentially the restriction for those. For example, County Measure A parks can only be used for parks-related projects, state gas tax for road projects, and so on. So in total, we're anticipating about just over $1 million in restricted revenue. This is insufficient to fully fund our capital improvement plan, and significantly so. Historically, we've supplemented restricted funding to fund CIP projects in 3 ways. The biggest is we've made routine transfers from general fund reserves to various reserve accounts for projects. We've received some grant funding for specific projects, and there have been efforts in the past to fundraise for specific projects. The most recent would be the McKegney Green project we did in, I think, 2018 perhaps. And although I was not here, I understand when the South Knoll Playground was constructed, there was a fundraising effort associated with that. And I believe when the ranch building was built on the Dairy Knoll property, I believe there was fundraising there as well. This shows you, so when we look at the big picture, we maintain fund reserves in 2 big buckets. One is restricted fund reserves and then general fund reserves. So the dark line at the bottom are the historic fund balance, total fund balances in restricted funds. The blue line in the middle is the historic fund balances in total of general fund reserves. And the green line at top is simply the combination of those 2. I don't have the slide, but this actually is better news than I projected. When you all adopted the budget last July, this total number of about 22 million in reserves was closer to 20. So we're actually in better shape than we expected we would be, which is good news. When we look at the general fund reserves specifically, these are the general fund, the separate general fund reserve accounts. The top 2 are sort of the same thing. This is what we call the general fund. And I don't want to confuse people. General fund reserves is a category. We actually have something called the general fund. And that's more or less the 2 top lines combined. The town has a policy that we will, at a minimum, keep in reserve 25% of an annual operating budget. And that represents the second line. So the top line in yellow is what we used to routinely call unallocated general fund reserves. We've sort of gotten away from calling it that. But if you want to think about money that the town hasn't allocated anywhere else and has more or less available, it's really that top line. We have a series of other general, what we call policy restricted reserve funds. That's that top block. And then the second block, discretionary set-asides, they're still considered general fund reserves, meaning it's discretionary money. But this council and past councils have chosen to put money in these reserve funds for either saving money for a big project. A good example of that is the very top one, which is the Public Works Corporation Yard. This fund reserve has been in existence long before I arrived 10 years ago, and we periodically try to add money to it, anticipating a large project someday to rebuild the corporation yard, which we'll touch on in a little bit. The other one I highlighted in green is very relevant. As council is well aware, we've spent a lot of time and money on parks, and we're sort of on the cusp of making some decisions about implementing some projects. In this year's budget, council authorized us to transfer 1.25 million into this reserve fund for parks. Based on expenditures this year, we believe we'll end the year with about 1.17 million in that fund reserve. And then the other 4 just show you again discretionary set-asides that the council has established for a total of about $16.5 million in general fund reserves. So again, I talked about transfers. Virtually every year as part of the budget process, we recommend transferring money from that. This is important, from that top line, from that yellow box into reserve funds. In this budget year, the council adopted a budget that authorized 1.25 million to a parks. We transferred $350,000 to the corporation yard reserve fund, 400,000 to the streets and drainage reserve fund, and 250,000 for the infrastructure and facility replacement reserve fund. So for a total FY26 amount of transfers of $2.43 million. So when we start looking at future funding needs, particularly for big projects, you all have been talking for the past couple of years about a lot of big projects. And I just want to sort of summarize kind of what this all looks like. Upkeep of existing infrastructure. This can be anything from streets, roads, storm drains, the existing parks we have. I'll give you one example. We will be including in this year's CIP, I believe about $250,000 or $300,000 to repair Elephant Rock, an existing park facility. We've talked about widening the ORT to make it safer. So, any sort of facility we already own, whether it's a building or a park, needs maintenance and is periodically going to require significant investment. We've discussed parks projects that are currently in design, and it's a little difficult to know the cost at this point, but based on the engineer's estimates from the preliminary designs, that could range from $5 to $7 million. And as I mentioned earlier, we currently have about 1.1 million in that reserve fund for parks. The Public Works Corporation Yard is one we've discussed very briefly. Difficult to know how much that'll cost. 5 years ago, we had a study done that said, in the ideal world, you'd be spending 15 million on that project. And we know that's probably not likely. So we're trying to figure out a project that will achieve most of what we need. And we believe that'll land in the $7 to $10 million range. And we currently have 4 million in reserve funds. Tonight, you adopted a traffic safety plan that included a number of projects that are expensive. We don't know the cost of those, but we could easily see, projects coming down that are going to cost significant money. That's not a comprehensive list, just an example. So the town has a number of options to think about when they consider how these will get funded. We can continue to pay as you go. And this is the model that the town has followed for many, many years. You've heard me say multiple times, the town has no debt. But going back to the early part of the discussion, we've funded capital projects by producing large surpluses in operating budget. That is the only way that yellow number gets bigger, right? Is we produce a surplus from operating budgets and that yellow number gets bigger. Because of that narrowing I'm seeing of revenues and expenditures and difficulty in balancing the budget, the surpluses we're producing are getting smaller and smaller, and that number is not going to grow at the rate that it had for many, many years. We continue to seek grant opportunities. Generally, they're project specific, and we're happy to continue to do that. Fundraising is obviously an option when we're talking about projects, particularly ones that are very enthusiastically supported by the public, like parks. But really one of the things the main thing I wanted to bring up, and I've mentioned to, I think, all of you in person, is the town. When we start looking at these big projects, the parks projects, the Corp Yard, the town could and perhaps should consider issuing debt to tackle some of these larger projects. I'm not going to go into deep detail on any of these. I just really wanted to get the conversation started. But there are several financing options for the town to consider if they wanted to go down that road. General obligation bonds are a very common way that towns raise money to do big projects. These require voter approval. Revenue bonds, similar. They require voter approval. There's a third. There are multiple ways, but there's another method called certificates of participation. I won't go into the detail, but it's essentially a lease-back financing methodology that public entities can use to more or less quickly raise funds for projects. Not used a whole lot in Northern California. It's more common in Southern California. We used it quite a bit in Santa Barbara County when I worked there. It's a discussion for a deeper discussion for another day of how that works. But at the end of the day, all of these have a common denominator. And that's that with any type of financing, the town's going to need to identify or create a new revenue source to make the debt payments, thinking of it as a mortgage payment. So, for example, I had our financial advisor, Sperry Capital, just run some quick numbers at the rates that are available today. If the town were to issue general obligation bonds totaling $7.5 million at 25 years, the annual debt payment would be $519,750 a year for 25 years. Example 2 brings you up to 10 million, and you can see that goes up to about $693,000 a year. So how would the town make those debt payments, or how do we generate revenue to make those debt payments? There are more than a couple ways to do it, but the most common methodology that you'll see in Marin in particular are what we call add-on sales tax or a parcel tax. So an add-on sales tax is a local voter-approved sales and use tax that are added to the California statewide base sales tax. If it comes in sort of two flavors. There's a general tax that only requires a simple majority of voter approval, and then there's a special tax which requires 2/3 a majority for voter approval. Both of these versions of a sales tax measure have to go to the voters, and they have to be combined with a regular election, meaning we can't call a special election to consider a sales tax measure. Another way that's very common, more common with special districts in school districts than with towns and cities, is a parcel tax. And again, this is a flat rate, voter approved property tax levied on real estate parcels rather than the property's assessed value. Again, requires a 2/3 majority voter approval and also must be combined with a regular election. So to talk about sales tax specifically, as Vice Mayor Nick Farr mentioned, this shows you the components of the state's 7.25% base sales and use tax. And as Councilmember Nick Farr asked and is right, that we get a percent, meaning for every $100 of sales in Tiburon subject to the sales and use tax, the town receives $1 of tax revenue. However, virtually I imagine almost every county that I don't know if there's anywhere in California where you actually pay 7.25%. And that's because local districts, cities, towns, and counties are able to add on sales tax measures that increase that sales tax. And in Marin, it's different by jurisdiction, but what the county over the years has proposed and passed 3 measures that add 1% to that 7.25% base rate. And one of those you heard about earlier from Tam. It's that 0.5% Transportation Authority Marin tax. There's a 0.25% Marin County Parks tax, which we get some funding from, and I showed you that in the restricted fund page. And then there's a 0.25 tax that supports the SMART train. So that brings the base county rate to 8.25%. And currently, Tiburon's only one of, besides the county unincorporated area, Tiburon is only one of 3 cities and towns that have the base rate, and that's Tiburon, Belvedere, and Ross. And of those 3, Tiburon's really the only jurisdiction that has a significant sales tax base. Ross and Belvedere do not generate very much sales tax, so it's unlikely they would there's no reason for them to consider adding on. So again, going back to this is a duplicate of the slide I showed earlier, which is our historic sales tax revenue generation. So for this year, we're estimating that we'll collect $925,000 in sales tax. If you were considering thinking about an add-on, I've just simply run these numbers where I don't believe you'd want to rely on what you think is 100% of the sales tax, given the variability if a restaurant were to close, et cetera. So I ran these numbers at 90% of the FY26 estimate. If you added a 0.25% to the tax, you generate $208,000 in revenue, 0.5%, $416, 3/4, $624, and 1%, $832. this is really, this is the last slide of my presentation with information. I'll go to the question slide. But it's really just to get you all thinking about revenue generation, and happy to answer questions, spend more time at another meeting with more detailed information about potential options.
So I just want to start by thanking you for that. That's super informative and very clear, really great. Because we've been talking about this for a while, and I've never understood it quite as well as now. This is just really well done. So thank you very much. And I think I'm happy to, if council members have questions they want to engage now, that's great. We can do that. The key purpose in this was to tee this up, because this is now going to be a conversation that we have for the rest of this year, trying to figure out how we're going to fund our priorities. So, yeah.
So I want to thank you for the presentation. I just would ask in the future that it be attached to the agenda, and the public can see it before the meeting, because I'm not even sure under the Brown Act what we can and can't talk about, because it wasn't attached, but I would just like to see it attached, because I got questions, as you know, what's this presentation about? Isn't there a report? And there wasn't one. All that being said, I think this is a good thing to start with, but I'd love to see it come back on a future meeting where all the information is attached. But I definitely want the public, who's been waiting almost 4 hours, to also be able to speak tonight, no matter what we do, because they've been very patient in the back, waiting to speak.
Is there any chance we can just withhold questions until after the public speaks?
Let's open public comment.
Hi, thank you for making time. I'm Chelsea with Parents for Parks and Rec. I live in Tiburon. I have 3 young children. And I definitely strongly encourage you as the town council to allocate funding to our parks, especially the former sanitation pond site and Bel Air play area are the areas that we think there's the most public support. In general, the public is very excited about the idea of revitalizing our parks, as you know, which have been neglected for decades. And I believe that we need these parks. Almost half of young adults nationally, 43%, report feeling lonely, and they need places that are welcoming and safe so that young people and people of all ages really can gather and socialize and exercise. So I think having a basketball court, which we have talked about a lot here, and we've had the kids here as well supporting it on multiple occasions. It can be used for multiple different purposes and by different ages. And we are excited about having the welcoming seating that kind of would serve as a hub for people using McKegney and using it for family purposes. So it could serve as sort of a village green or town gathering space, which would be a true asset to our town and increase revenue downtown. So we are very excited about it and we love the designs. So from the budget discussion that just happened, I'm definitely not a finance person, but to me, it sounds like there's plenty of money floating around. Those were big numbers I was hearing. So I was also excited that Greg, our town manager, has clearly thought in detail about many opportunities for funding. And I think it sounds very promising. So in terms of what the public would prefer between a new town building for the public works versus a town gathering space that everyone could use, I think it would be pretty clear that people would prefer to have the investment in the parks. But I really hope that there is a way to do both and it doesn't come down to prioritizing one over the other, because I think both are valuable. So I know that it's very hard to build in California due to red tape. I know that it can be scary to be a leader and take political risks, but I also see how far we have come. And we are so close to making this a reality for our kids and future generations. If you, as leaders on the town council, could show excitement and allocate at least partial funding and then, continue to work to build support for these parks projects. I think we have this in the bags, and then donors will come forward and try to fill in the gap if needed. Thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you. Hello.
I'm Jenna. I'm just going to build a little bit on what I spoke about earlier. One thing I didn't really see emphasized in that presentation, which was a great presentation, it was very clear overall, but the really like a focus on property tax, like it seems to be the majority of the town's revenue. And I was looking at the reports that are online, and thank you for making them so accessible and clear. And it appears that property tax just in 3 years has increased 14%. So we're collecting 8.1 million now. It was 7.1 million just 3 years ago. That seems like a big increase. It's certainly more than the inflation rate. So I'm like, I know things are expensive, but that's a lot of money, and our parks haven't been improved in a long time. So I think it'd be great to spend some of that revenue toward improving our parks. I'd also like to request that our group, or a sort of offshoot of our group that we're creating to focus on fundraising, could give a presentation to the town council and actually get on the agenda so we can give a PowerPoint presentation and talk about some of our fundraising ideas, some of the grants that we've seen. We've tracked the park projects that have been happening in Marin County. There's a lot happening. A lot of our neighboring communities are making major investments in their park system, and I think it's time for Tiburon to step it up. I know we're getting close. The master plan was a great step, but it's now time to kind of carry these ideas forward. And lastly, I think it would be great to look at some of the neighboring towns and how they're making it work. Like Corte Madera, for example, like every year they're making major investments in their park system. Right now alone, they are spending $350,000 to update the turf in Town Park. They're replacing the playground for $335,000, and they're spending $435,000 to update Menke Park, which is the small park with the gazebo where they hold the little concerts in the summer. And these are being funded through the town budgets, through the operating capital improvement budget, along with some grants and some community donations. So I think it'd be great to just talk to them and look at what they're doing and see if we can replicate that here in town and really just take great care of our parks. So thank you so much for everything that you do. I'm sure balancing a budget is very hard, and I really appreciate the very clear presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Online, we will recognize Linda.
All right. Hi, my name is Linda, and I have 4 kids in Tiburon. Thank you guys all for hearing us every time and everything that you do for the town. And Greg, I think that my son Harrison and I were the guinea pigs for this presentation. We got a special viewing of this presentation at Town Hall, and it was so informative and so helpful. And he sat through his first budget meeting at age 9, so that was exciting. But basically, I just think that parks doesn't need to wait for an extra tax to pass to be funded by the town, for the town to make a commitment. RUSD is going to be going for a sizable bond at this upcoming election, so I don't know. I'm not a finance person, all of the things that are going into this sales tax vote, but I just don't think that parks needs to wait on that. Huge significant investments were already made with the master plan and a lot more over the last few years. And I have to assume that if those huge investments were made just to make the plans, that the town is ready to invest in parks. It would be great to have $2 million in the budget for parks for this year. And we're really excited to fundraise. I'm very energized behind it. I think that it would be so helpful to understand the process and procedure, what we can and cannot, tell people who want to donate that they can or can't have, and just sort of getting direction from the town around fundraising. And I also just think that the town priorities of like the sanitation ponds being a top priority is important because people are going to be donating. So, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Next is Emily.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's there at this late night. Thank you to Craig, who did a lot of work, I know, preparing for this and for giving such a great presentation on this. And I echo what others have been saying. I'm a Tiburon resident. I have children. I enjoy the outdoors myself, and really urge the council to put money that is there towards the parks and towards improving our systems. I think this is a real opportunity to make a difference in our town, and a real opportunity to have legacy for you all, town council, for the government, the staff that's there, for all of us who've been working on this. There's money there. I recognize there's a lot of competing priorities, but there has been money allocated. I think there's room to allocate more and to find more. And I think there's a really beneficial outcome for all of this. I would encourage so much the town to look at what neighboring towns have done, as Jenna said, and including Belvedere, who did a really strong fundraising campaign for the Belvedere Park, and how they were able to use existing nonprofit mechanisms and create a nonprofit sort of within the town to accept donations. I think there's a lot of appetite in the community. This is such a tangible improvement and such improvements that really benefit so many people. A lot of what the government unfortunately has to spend money on, as you all know, is behind the scenes, but to be able to put money towards something like Parks and Rec that really people see, like the sanitation pond site, to be able to make a difference there, it could be a really tremendous outcome for all of us. I think but I think that people need to see the towns putting your money behind it before we can really make the big push for fundraising, which I think is there. So I'm excited to see where this goes and really appreciate all you can do to put the money behind all the great work that's been done so far on the plans.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments.
Great. Okay, so we'll close the public hearing or public comments. If we have questions or comments from the council, we can do them now.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Greg, did you ever connect with Todd Gusmano in Mill Valley and talk about their recent sales tax increase and the debt that they're funding? And if you haven't, can you talk to them about it? Because that might be interesting to
We'd be happy to. Both the town clerk and I did look at the material, that Mill Valley put together when they, eventually passed the resolution, putting the measure on the ballot. I think it was it must have been the last election. So 2024.
2024, they passed the sales tax, but I think they just issued the debt.
Yeah.
This spring. Yeah. And I think like $15 million.
Yep.
So, I mean, it was they got muni rates, and I assume they were general obligation bonds, but I don't know.
I would have to double check, but likely they were.
But they had a very comprehensive process before that I think we would want to consider in terms of like, what are we going to use money for? What are you going to spend on? It's bigger than even just the two things that they meant, than just the parks and the courtyard. Like, it's everything. Like, what are we going to spend the money on in the next 15 years, kind of thing. But that's my 2 cents.
Yes.
Yeah. And one other thing, I'd also like to see broadband brought back into the list of projects in terms of looking at funding models for how we could pay for that. So at the next meeting, whenever it comes up.
Oh, and so my only comments are that given that some of like our sales tax is well below what other jurisdictions have as a source of revenue, we might look at that seriously. And also to keep in mind that for the past 25 years that I've been on the council, there's been a strong pushback on assuming debt, floating bonds. And so perhaps our first priority should be to find out what is most accessible and acceptable now.
I wanted to just kind of go through and ask maybe ask a question for each of the categories. Um, for the general reserve funds, Greg, um, and for the budget, what is currently allocated that can be used by a CIP project related to parks?
For parks related projects?
Yes.
Well,
But
again,
what's already allocated is what I'm asking. Because I remember we earmarked some dollars in this last budget cycle.
yeah, I don't have the project list of CIP for this current year, but in terms of raw numbers, again, the council in this year's budget, we transferred $1.25 million to the what we call the Parks Reserve Fund.
Okay.
We had a number of projects, we're spending some of that money this year, both on designing parks, for instance. And my prediction is at the end of this year, June 30, there'll be about 1.1, I don't remember what I said, 1.17 million in that fund. But the reality is, again, all of those general fund reserve funds are general fund, meaning that the council, they're discretionary funds. And although they're in reserve funds, technically the council could choose to take money from one fund and move it to another. I don't recommend that, but they technically could. So when looking at, this slide here, the yellow represents what we used to always call unallocated general fund reserves. And I just want to caution everybody, I'm as enthusiastic as the next person about parks projects. But this is, for lack of a better word, the piggy bank for the town. And historically, when I first started 2015, 2016, 2017, we were routinely producing $1 million plus surpluses in operating budget. So this number was being added to $1 million, routinely a year. That's just simply not the case anymore. We're talking 100,000, 200, 300,000 now surpluses. Right. And that's because of the first issue I raised, which is our general fund revenue is growing at a rate that's slower than our general fund expenditures. So the surpluses are getting narrower and it's getting harder and harder to balance the budget.
So second question is around fundraising, and might be a question for Marion. For the folks who are here, are there restrictions or legal issues that we should make the public aware of when fundraising for a town project? Does the money have to be given to the town in a certain way? Are there mechanisms?
So I'm going to just jump. I can jump in. I think, I've been in communication with the group, the Moms for Parks, pretty routinely, and I've also been in contact with the Tiburon Peninsula Foundation about this issue, and they've agreed that if there is a fundraising effort for parks, they will act as the more or less the fiduciary for donated funds.
Right.
Anybody's donations will be tax deductible. They'll be, however we want to structure the funds, they're happy to do it. So they've agreed to be
Great.
part of this process. So.
All right, around grants, specific to parks, but also, also for other projects. If we're interested in securing grants or learning more about what grants we could be eligible for, how do we get started?
So there's any number of ways. Municipalities or entities that have a lot of staff, often have folks that's what they do. We don't have that luxury and probably can't fund a position like that. Of course, there are consultant groups that are absolutely willing, and this is their whole thing. And on that note, I've actually had a conversation last week with a gentleman who works for a company called California Consulting, very well-known consulting company in California that work with public agencies on identifying and applying for grants. That was probably the most likely route for the town if we want to sort of have a serious, research into possible grants for whatever reason, whether it's parks or broadband or the Community Resilience Center that we're talking about next door at the library. And I do have some, sort of pricing information from them on what that looks like, either on a project by project basis or on a sort of retainer basis where they would work with the town, sort of.
Is their model where we pay them or they take a VIG off of the grant?
You pay them. Okay. Now you do pay them you pay them more for
both.
larger grants, but there's no like percentage of the grant they get or anything like that.
And then for sales tax, same question to that. What's the process for getting started on if this group wants to explore adding either half quarter, half, 3/4, or a full % of sales tax? How do we get started with that?
From a process perspective, it's actually not that complicated. But it gets complicated, and Councilmember Ryan, brought up the example from Mill Valley, and it's sort of standard practice for municipalities when they're considering this to start early and sort of start educating the public as to what the potential need is and why we're doing it. And there's usually a PR campaign associated with advocating for it. So it's generally not something that's done quickly. It's generally deliberative and thoughtful and started a year or two in advance. Again, I'll just remind you that it has any measure, if the council were ever to do that, has to be combined with a regular election. So essentially you get a shot every 2 years.
And then for I didn't see anything in here about non-standard approaches to increasing revenue. If the town were to decide to expand, for instance, and increase its tax base by getting larger, or if the town were to look at maybe adding services through acquisition, what does that process look like?
So from a geographic perspective, the town is incorporated, has its existing boundaries. We also have it established what's called sphere of influence that is determined by LAFCO, which is the local agency formation committee at the county. In theory, the town, can annex or property within that sphere of influence. And we periodically are asked to do that on a parcel by parcel basis, mostly because parcels that are contiguous to the town's boundary now are seeking connection to a source system, for instance, and LAFCO requires what's called dual annexation. So if a property that's attached contiguous to the town wants to annex into a sewer district, they also have to annex into the town if they're already contiguous to it. On a bigger scale, we don't, and maybe Miriam has experience with this, I'm not familiar with any large scale annexations. One just example is periodically over the past 10 years, we've been approached by residents of Strawberry who said, boy, we'd love to annex into the town. And, and we've said to them, well, that's a big process and it's a LAFCO driven process. So it's possible. I would say, I don't know for sure, but my guess is simply annexing additional residential properties isn't probably a revenue generator. I mean, in theory it is. You would generate more property tax revenue, but there's also a cost to deliver services to those areas, including maintaining the roads, the storm drains, that we'd be responsible for. You'd be far better off annexing commercial areas that generate more sales tax.
Do they have to be contiguous?
I believe, again, I'm not an expert on annexation. I don't believe you can, even if it's in your sphere of influence, I don't believe you can randomly annex parcels that aren't already, right next to the town's borders.
Okay. And then what about non-commercial, non-residential annexations or acquisitions? Like, I guess JPAs are probably the simplest one. Like if we were to combine or maybe enter into a new agreement with another entity in some way.
So I'm going to suggest that it's getting kind of late and these are pretty creative ideas. Maybe we could take it offline. I mean, I don't know that we're going to be doing any of this stuff like this year to fund our parks.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know when this is going to get agendas again, so I want to make sure I just ask some questions.
I mean, I'm happy to chat with you offline and meet,
Yeah.
meet with you and we can.
Sounds like the advanced Greg course.
Yeah. And then where do we want to go from here with this process? So it was agendized as a discussion item. What's the next step? Do we want to take a next step on this? Do we want to come back?
Well, we have a number of related agendized topics coming up. So, for example, we have our actual budget process coming up, and remind me the date. That's the
June 3rd.
June
Yep.
3rd. We're going to be doing the budget. Then on the 17th, we're going to be talking about park proposals that come from Post. So, absolutely, we need to. I think the initial Post proposals are going to be relatively. They're going to be the small neighborhood parks they are kind of pay as you go projects. Are smaller, so we can kind of deal with those. What you're asking is a good question. We should agendize it again regularly to come up with an actual plan. But this was just the tee off. So I would imagine within a couple months we'll be sitting here talking about this in more practical terms.
Yeah, I think initially it seems like the sales tax is going to take a while to get going, but that's a potential significant revenue stream. It
Sure.
looks like grants seem tricky, but but that's something where there could be a lot of meat on the bone potentially if it's done the right way with the right partner. But this is really encouraging. I'm glad we had this on here, and thank you, Greg, for putting this together.
Excellent.
To your point, though, is it possible that we are going to have to agendize fairly soon some things along the lines of if there is a fundraising effort, how are we going to recognize donors and how are we going to appoint somebody to be the executive director or whatever of that?
So what I would say about that is that the Moms for Parks have been very organized and have come up with a pretty sophisticated set of ideas about how to do this.
Right.
And
Get them on the agenda.
And that's what we've been talking about. We just have to figure out the right, whether it's the next meeting or the 17th. I think it would be great to have them help us shape the approach.
Yes, I
because
agree.
They have all the energy around the fundraising and a lot of good ideas.
Great, thanks.
Any other comments? Great. Good meeting. Do we have any reports from council or town manager?
I have a short report. This is just a follow-up on a brief couple of comments we had at an earlier meeting about producing an AI policy for the town. Based on that, I thought the council would be interested in SB 1159, which is a bill that specifies for the purpose of the California Public Records Act, the Brown Act, and several other acts that a person or participant, member of the public, and any other similar terms under the act referring to those who may engage with government agencies do not include artificial intelligence systems, autonomous agents, robots, or other non-human entities, whether physical or digital.
Robots can't violate the Brown Act. Is that the idea? Robots cannot violate the Brown Act?
They can't count as meeting the Brown Act. Were you going to say something, Miriam? So this is before the legislative committee, MCCMC's legislative committee to support at their next meeting.
Funky.
What do you mean? It's farsighted.
Do you have a report?
Nothing else to report, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I think we're adjourned. Thank you.